a goal, Quishbilly Huddersfield Town! The most famous goal of Quishbilly's life.
Is this the moment for Lee Fowler? It is. Take your place in Division 2, Huddersfield Town.
Thank you.
And Steve Simonson's boots now. He's missed. Steve Simonson clears the frame of the goal and collapses in a heap of tears. Huddersfield Town are promoted.
Mustafa Schindler has a chance to write his name in Huddersfield Town legend. And he takes that chance!
Hello and welcome to the Andy Takes That Chance Ooh to Be a Terrier Radio Leeds. Can we say Radio Leeds, Matt? Okay, maybe unofficial. End of season review where against all odds Neil Warnock has kept Huddersfield Town in the Championship. Up until the Great One walked in, it was pretty much a season of pain and misery, but being the sadists that we are, we're going to relive that as well as the good stuff at the end as well. So with myself, Matt Shaw, to look back over the season, warts and all, from the Andy Takes That Chance podcast, we've got Johnny Gillespie, we've got Richard Kosmala, and we've got Brady down there. And from the Ooh to Be a Terrier podcast and Huddersfield Examiner, Mr. Chicken and David Hartrick. And the special guest, as always, the big man between the sticks, we've got Matt Glennon from BBC West Yorkshire Sport. Right then, guys. So how this evening will go, what we'll do is we'll talk about the season. We'll have some awards to announce as we go through as well. And then we'll have a 10-minute break at the midpoint where you can go get a drink. And then we'll open up to a Q&A at the end, and you can fire any questions to us, to whoever you like. Right, so what we'll do is we'll break it down into the different eras that we had with the manager. So we started with Danny Schofield.
It's good that this is in a single season. We're talking about having several distinct eras.
I know, all within 9 months. So yeah, if we roll the clock back to just under 12 months ago, Huddersfield Town had finished third. Lost the playoff final, as we know, now faced with a new parachute paymentless future under Dean Hoyle. The club decided to cash its chips, would you say, a little bit, with 6 of the playoff final team would leave the club. We sold Pippa, Lewis O'Brien, Harry Toffolo, loanees Daniel Sinani, Levi Colwell returned, and Naby Sarr left on a free. There seemed to be maybe a little bit of downscaling, you would say, wouldn't you? Probably due in part to the parachute payments expiring, you would think. This seemed to cause Carlos Corberán to work out, later citing a lack of ambition in one report. A chaotic summer when I think as fans you're praying that you build on things, but quite mental really, Steve.
Yeah, I think Dean Hoyle was quite open in that interview he did with Radio Leeds that there was a certain amount of investment that he felt the club needed and a certain amount of investment that he felt he could provide, and the two numbers were slightly different. So I think there was a little bit of, as you say, cashing in chips. I don't think anyone was particularly shedding any tears over Pippa, weirdly, at the time. But obviously O'Brien and Toffolo both going on the same day, and to Forest as well in particular, did sting a bit. I think, I'm sure you're going to come on to the incomings, but I think everyone sort of expected Lewis to go. I think everyone was surprised that he hadn't gone the previous year, in truth. But I think Toffolo going as well was a bit of a kick in the teeth, because I think some people had hoped they might keep him.
Yeah, I think when you look back over the summer, I don't think there was like mass panic when we were looking at the business, but when you look back and think, yeah, it's the first team players they lost, that's the problem. It's one thing losing squad players, but losing first team players like that hurts you. And, I don't think their summer business was particularly bad, but there was a lot of squad business. And as I said, it was that first 11 that suffered, not the squad necessarily. And then Carlos going, which did blindside the club. There's no denying that. And having spoken to people in the club, they were, slightly surprised, to say the very, very least. It sounded like it was a bit of a mad 24 hours. And then Danny was always the succession plan, but he was the succession plan in a year or 2 years. And unfortunately, they had to do it this summer. And I did the Bolton friendly, because I think Steve thinks friendlies are beneath him.
I was on holiday.
I did the Bolton friendly, and I spoke to Danny after the game, sort of on and off mic, and I did the Doncaster friendly as well and spoke to him, and he was so enthusiastic, so up for it, trying so hard. But when we'll get into it, but I think the club let him down a bit, if I'm honest.
well, everyone knows I played with Danny Schofield at 2 clubs, so he is a mate of mine. And yeah, I think you're right with that. He should never been given the job. He should have been given interim. See how he got on with it. Then there's no pressure. There was not even a press conference to announce he was the manager. It was farcical anyway. So he came under a cloud. It was remind me of the Andy Ritchie stage when the empty chair was there. Then Andy walks through the door after Phil Parkinson turned it down, and we never got to the bottom of that either. And Carlos, he was right at the top of the tree. He had a very small budget, got his team to a playoff final, cheated by a referee as we all know because we were all there and saw Moss's last performance there, which I'm sure he enjoyed, but no one else did. And it was just it was a terrible time because Carlos had a way of playing, a way of training. It adapted from his ridiculous Bielsa training, murder ball, let's kill everyone in training every day and let's see if they don't get injured. He adapted, and that season, no injuries hardly. He did really, really well. And then he walks out of the building. And then obviously Scoey's got to take over. And people that may not know Scoey's a very strong-minded fella. He's got his ideas how he wants to play. He's got his idea how he wants to do things. He had ways of, the club said they had an identity, but when you don't spend any money, your identity's pretty hard to establish, really, with new players, new people. And I think it was a little bit on the quick side, in hindsight, bringing the clown that they brought in after him. Then they probably should have kept going anyway, because I'm sure it wouldn't have been as big disaster as Fotheringham. So I think the mistakes were not bringing a little bit more first team quality in to help Carlos, because I'm sure they'd have sold the club quicker as well, in all honesty, if they'd have kept Carlos in place and given him some money. And it was just not how you want to start a season. You want your pre-season to be hard, you want it to be tough, but you want it to be focused on that first game of the season. And then suddenly it's like, where's Carlos? Everyone's looking around. He's not at training, and you've got to start again with 3 weeks to go till the season started.
Yeah, I think it was a late finish and an early start, wasn't it?
I think it's just recognising, like Dave said, how much the club didn't need a reset after Wembley, but there certainly was a rebuild given the players that had left, and then had Carlos to that as well. I think maybe the club were a little bit potentially naive to how big a job there was, and then marrying Schofield with that, who by all accounts, obviously a really good coach and had been tapped up by this European team. It's just recognising actually he'd probably need a bit more support or a wiser head to help guide him through that. I think if he had that, and obviously alongside with a full pre-season and maybe a bit of more quality in the squad from the loans that came in, he probably could have done better. But I think it was, again, we saw a similar situation with other managers of the season. But I think it's just recognising how big a job that was after Wembley, and just kind of thinking, well, they finished third last season. Hopefully the worst case scenario finished mid-table. Wasn't quite how it seemed to play out.
And the problem is when Carlos Coburn went, everybody within the club became a coach. So Scoey wasn't really allowed to make the decisions he wanted and the things that was going on in there. And it was, all backs against the wall, which everyone wants the club to survive and do well. But I think there was a little bit too much behind the scenes going on as well to actually let the lad get on with his job.
Yeah, so just to remind you of those summer signings, there was Will Boyle, David Kasumu, Conor Mahoney, Kyle Hudlin, Jack Radoni, Yuta Nakayama, Tino Angerin, Kane Kessler-Hayden, Tyree Simpson, Luke Mbete, and Bihal Helik. Mixed bag, really, wouldn't you say?
That's an understatement. Mixed bag.
Yeah, real mixed bag. I think obviously there's some really good ones in there. I think the biggest thing when you look back on that, and I know likes of Boyley isn't, not everyone's favourite, but he was signed to play probably fewer games than he ended up playing.
He was name-checked by Ronnie Jepson in one of the final videos as well, wasn't he, for his outstanding contributions.
Yeah, he's a top lad, Boyley, top professional. But Mbete, I think, was just a bit of extra cover who ended up playing more games than I think he should have done as well. And there's some real project players in there, but I think ultimately they put too many eggs in the Tino Andrin basket. I think he was the big signing, the big sort of attacking impetus, bit of quality. You look at that list and the attacking players other than him were all project players. So, yeah, I think putting so much on Tino turned out to be a mistake because obviously he ended up missing almost the entire season.
Let's go on else. Who do you think the best signing was last summer or maybe last season? I've got our first award is the signing of the season award, which probably won't be too many surprises who wins it. Any shouts? Luke Mbete? Any advance on Luke Mbete from Conor
Mahoney?
Conor Mahoney
for Bolton, not Huddersfield.
Mbete. Okay, so we put some voting options out online, and everybody has very kindly voted. In 5th place was David Kasumu with 0.6%, just one vote for poor David. Thomas Vaslik.
It's good to know he's a listener, though.
Yeah, well, there you go. 5.5% for Thomas Vaslik. 3rd place, Joseph Hongbo with 8.5%. In 2nd place, Jack Redone with 13.3%. 1st place with 72.3%. Undisputedly, the best signing Huddersfield made this summer is Michal Helik.
So, he started off very slowly as well. So yeah, he really built himself into it. I think he's done it exceptionally well. He sort of, him and Tom Lee sort of morphed into each other near the end where they were just everywhere. Every header, every time the ball came in the 6-yard box, it was one of them. You couldn't decide which one had headed it, kicked it, but you knew it was one of them.
I've got some stats, Matt, on Michal Helik. I know you love a stat. So this is in terms of the all-championship centre-backs throughout last season. Michal Helik finished 9th in terms of most tackles, 10th in most interceptions, and he was the number 1 centre-back in the championship for clearances last year and 2nd in shots blocked. So it's quite a decent signing and a decent season, I think, from Michal Helik.
It's absolute madness that he was available on deadline day. And I said it at the time, when you looked at his stats for Barnsley over the previous 2 seasons, he was one of the top 5 centre-backs in the league.
But it's Barnsley, though.
I know it's Barnsley.
You've only got to have one decent game. There's a taxi waiting for you to go.
But I'm not
else.
talking about he was Barnsley's best player. I'm saying across all centre backs in the Championship over the previous 2 years, he was in the top 5 statistically. It's absolute madness that he was available on deadline day, but great that he was because Town needed him after Matty Pearson got injured.
I know he's finished 2nd on that poll. Quite considerably 2nd, but I would give a massive mention to Jack Redone as well. I think if you could almost ask this question in the next season, who is the best signing this season? I think Jack Redone would, if that makes sense, would pull a lot higher on that. Cause I think we've kind of seen him develop massively over the last kind of 10 to 12 games. And again, he had a really slow start. I think some people were questioning where he plays, where is he going to fit? Who does he replace? Was he a Lewis O'Brien? Where is he going to fit? But I think next season we'll see continuing that trajectory for Jack Redone. I think we'll really see how big a signing he actually was in the summer just gone.
I think when you look at a lot of their business, though, there's a lot of buts. You know, I'm a bit like you, and I've said it on the pod that I think Redone will probably get better. But you look at someone like Will Boyle, brilliant professional, but he was signed as a defender, and he's not very good at it. Not at championship level. And I think their business, as I said before, it was fine for squad business, but they needed first-team signings. And I think when they lost Carlos, they should have really thought, hang on, we need to bring some quality to this first team. And they stuck with their model and their recruitment model at the time, and that there are reasons for doing that, and that you can have admiration for that. But that's where I think the club let him down a little bit, because he didn't have the quality at the time. You know, Helik didn't come in till deadline day. And it was always felt like a little bit of a hide into nothing looking back. But I think players like Kasumu and Redone, they're good signings. They're going to be really good players. I know I change the pronunciation every single time.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
You've had a whole year and you still can't get it.
Yeah, on our podcast, I just call him Rudders. But yeah, and that's the thing. I just think there's so much business that comes with a but. And this summer, you know, I know we're not throwing forward to this summer, but this summer is one where their business has got to be first team business that doesn't have caveats and buts.
You like butts, don't you, Dave?
Yeah, there's a man who's planning his trip to Amsterdam to play Ajax next season, doing some business with a butt.
The last time I went to Amsterdam, I can't remember a thing after stepping off the plane, so no.
We'll move on from there. Right, so I've got Danny Schofield down to chat about in his 9 games, but it feels a bit like kicking a man while he's down a little bit, doesn't it? We've kind of covered that.
There's no point, because 9 games, getting thrown in the deep end and having, let's say, a lot of background interference when trying to make decisions. Obviously, I'm trying to say this without saying it. There was a lot of interference in team selections, everything as well. So it wasn't a fair ride. I'm not just saying that because I'm a mate. Anyone who listens to me, no, I say exactly how I feel on a regular basis.
Never.
And that's it. I just felt, and speaking to like Matty Pearson and people like that, they said there was a plan. They could tell a plan, unlike, obviously, in the next man that came along who just liked to play up front like he was Brian Glover and Kez. There was actually something going on there. There was no time to develop. We don't know. You know what I mean?
There's bad
and they
luck
got
as well,
rid.
Matt. You think back to the Blackpool game and Hawkeye's not switched on, and that's ultimately costing Danny Schofield his job almost.
Making a mistake. Yeah. He doesn't have Hellick, basically, and you mentioned Hellick probably had 2 games where he wasn't great, and then he was fine after that, but I think they were both under Danny. So
it killed me as well, and nearly got me sat that Blackpool game, because I wasn't there for that as away. And I mentioned the fact that the game after, I think the ball went over and I said, it looks like they've put the Jorex batteries in this time. But obviously, not Jorex batteries. And Johnny's looking at me going, Matt, I don't think you mean Jorex batteries. Mine was somewhere else.
Good holiday then, yeah? Right, okay. What we'll do is we'll do a second award, which Johnny's going to do. So this second award is let me read this because it is a tricky one. So the Phil Senior Mick Wadsworth Tribute Award for the best breakthrough player at Huddersfield Town. And Johnny's going to take you through the options.
This was because Phil was the only guy who actually has any time at all for Mick Wadsworth, isn't he? So, yeah, so the award for best breakthrough act in reverse order, we had Nick Bilokovic.
Yep.
It's Hard Life.
Nailed it.
Rodoni's not on this list, so we're fine. 3.6%. I'm not going to say his name again. Fourth was Ben Jackson at 6.6%. We had third with Etienne Kamara at 13.9%. Second, Brianna Diarra at 22.3%. And number one, Jahima Headley at 53.6%. So quite a considerable winner there.
Hello to anyone that listens to and he takes that chance podcast. I just want to give a big thanks to who voted me as their breakthrough player of the season. It's much appreciated. I hope you have a good summer and see you all next season.
Yeah, pretty comprehensive, isn't it?
So a really good season for Jahimi Headley there, isn't he? Chicken, Stephen.
Yeah, I mean, I went to watch Harrogate during the World Cup break, I think it was, or around that time, and he was obviously still there. Town had 4 players there at the time, and you talk to any of the locals and you ask them like who stood out. All of them, Jahim. Like not just like among the Town players, but amongst Harrogate Town's players for the whole season. They're like, it's Jahim. You watch the B team the past few years, he was a standout player doing exactly what you've seen him do for the first team. He's like a little bull, isn't he? Just, you winded him up and he'll just smash through people.
Durex Bunny.
Loves to get forward. Durex Bunny, yes.
That's probably why Mark Fothering was a good idea to put him on in the 90th minute in a 2-1 up at Blackpool in a bare pit of a game and give him his Championship League debut.
Well, but I did love that as soon as he came on for
he had a shot,
as soon as he came on for his debut, the first thing he did was take the ball in his own half, take it towards the opposition box, get into the box off a 1-2 and have a shot. Yeah, and it's like, that's Jahim Headley. That's what you're going to get.
He just forgot to get back. That was the problem.
Yeah. There's obviously, I think he's better going forward than he is going back, but he's right at the start of his career.
He's going to be a good player. He's going to be a really good player.
And it makes you think that left back next season, even with Ruffles going and with Nakayama coming back as well and with Jackson available, left back's fine.
Yeah, it's a real shame that he kind of had that bit of hiatus under Warnock where he was injured. Kind of missed a few games. I think he was really getting into his stride, and it's one of them where 10 games with Warnock, a bit of advice, bit in your ear could have made a massive difference to a player who's a little bit shy, a little bit not necessarily lacking confidence, but I think a Warnock for a player like Headley, if he could have had a bit more interaction with him, probably would have just helped even more. But yeah, I personally think he got my vote, and I'm quite excited to see him develop as a few players for next season.
Right, I think that concludes the Schofield era. So thanks, Johnny. Johnny's going to sit down now, and we're going to have Mac Fotheringham's number one fan is going to come and join us. Listen, Mr. Kosi's going to come up and join us now and join in.
Listen.
He doesn't get too high when he wins and too low when he loses, do you, Kosi? Okay, so what we'll do before we get flying in, we'll do our third award, which is the Young Player of the Season. So the difference between this and the previous one is the breakout specifically from the academy or B team, whereas this is for any player technically under the age of 23. And Mr. Hartrick...
Technically under the age of 23.
As of, is it 1st of September? Something like that, is it? Yeah, some rules or something.
So, the Young Player of the Season.
Any guesses?
Any guesses? Well, number 5, David Kasumu. Kasumu. Sorry, couldn't get that. Joint second. 3 players in joint second. Brahima Diarra, Jahim Headley and Joseph Hungbo. And winner, Rudders, with 80.1% of the vote, Jack Rodoni, which I think, to be fair, nobody can really argue with that.
Did you specifically give that one to Dave knowing that he couldn't say Jack Rodoni?
No,
It's worked out well, hasn't it?
Dave, I'm going to throw one in here, hand grenade. In Kamara, up until January, he would have been a strong contender. And wow, the season how it's finished for him. What's your thoughts from here to Zero? That Leicester move or what have you? What went wrong?
I think it would be completely fair to say his agent is a very busy man who likes to get on the phone, and I think his head was certainly turned, and I don't think he was ever the same. Once his head was turned, I think at one point he did think that something was going to happen in January, and it hasn't. He's got all the talent in the world.
I knew there's a book coming here because I'm going to agree with you, I'm sure.
Yeah, he's got all the talent in the world, but the problem is, clearly at the moment he's got a little bit of growing up to do. I think it's a mental thing, and I think it's not just, I'm not just talking about, people will think when I'm saying that I'm talking about the transfer stuff, it's on the pitch as well. There are times when you can see him switch off. There are times, I wouldn't say he gives up, but there are times where he gives up on situations that he shouldn't do.
Or he doesn't see him.
Yes.
I think or he doesn't. There's a couple of times where the game passed him by and you think he's not done it out of laziness or anything like, because I do think he is a bit, he can be a bit languid at times, the intensity's not there. And especially when you're relegation battle, you need people up for it and you need a bit of pace in the team, come on, let's get going. And you could see him sometimes counting the pigeons at the top of the ceiling. You're thinking, come on.
Which is funny because for the B team, he was always overly aggressive. And they had to calm him down a lot.
Because that's the B team.
So it might have been a bit of overcorrection. But I think what Dave says is right. And I think exactly that, the switching off is what did for him in the end, because he started against Burnley. And I believe that was I believe Warnock had said to Jonathan Hogg, who do you want to play with? And he said Kamara and Rodoni. That was how that team got selected. And then for the Birmingham game, Kamara then kept his place, and then he wasn't tracking back against Burnley, and that was it. Kasumu also got bombed out, but he got back in. Kamara never did.
I think the one thing I would say is I think there's very simple corrections he can make, and he's going to be some player. I mean, if he just looks over his shoulder, he's going to improve his game by sort of 5%. He is going to be some player. But I don't think it's going to be at Huddersfield.
He's what, is he, 19?
Yeah.
It's fine.
He's currently in the France under-20 squad, isn't he? You don't get in that squad, do you, if you're not a bad player? So
no.
There we go. Right, so the Fothering area. This is the fun section of the evening, isn't it? Matt's absolutely looking forward to this.
I don't know how that man walks into a building and someone says, you know what, he's for me. Here's 3 years, here's a shitload of money, and bring Canberra in. You know what I mean? The mind baffles. I've been in football a long time. I've played, obviously, doing this job. I've met a lot of people. I've met a lot of blaggers, and he's in my top 2 or 3. He is absolutely a shambles. And from training to team selection to team setup. And I can't say enough, because you see people getting overridden for chances. You see people not giving chances. He should have gone a month before he did, but obviously financially and Neil not being quite there as well. The mind boggles. It really does, because I know what happened in training, obviously, because I speak to people. I know what happened, what I saw. I never rewind Oggy's interviews because I don't listen to anything back. We get the show, you move on to the next game, bang, we're on there. I did it twice with him. It was the Reading game. I thought he's definitely seen something different than everyone who's ringing in, everyone who's doing something. And just the things he said at times. I remember when Russell went, I've said this to you before, went to Barnsley. He goes, great lad, Mormon, good luck at Barnsley. And I thought, no, he didn't say that. And that's my second rewind. Good lad, Mormon, good luck at Barnsley. And then just left it. Why? Who says that? What human says that in professional football? I don't know.
I could never get a handle on, you mentioned his post-match comments, I could never get a handle on Mark, because whenever I thought, they've played all right there and he's going to be pleased, he'd come out and be fuming. And whenever I thought, they've been shocking there, he'd come out and say, I'm really pleased with the effort.
He reads social media and he listens to podcasts and he does that because he gets the tone of what we're all saying. And I think he changes from game to game.
I'm not sure
he goes in, I think he did, but...
George Costanza, do the opposite.
Yeah, so just rolling back slightly, Town were initially linked with David Wagner, weren't they? Others were mentioned, like Michael Carrick, and then Matt's friend came out of nowhere talking about scaffolding.
They're on decent money, scaffolders. What's he talking about, this struggle? In the 80s, they were flying up in Scotland.
I don't think either of those other names were ever ever going to happen.
They were just in the air.
Well, Carrick got interviewed, so I don't know what happened in that interview. So you don't know
just
where the ambitions
Fotheringham
were.
was the better man.
He walks in. There you go.
Wagner was never on. They couldn't have got him at that time.
No. But yeah, so Mark Fotheringham, where do we start on this? So I think a few of us at the time felt we probably needed a more experienced head coach. We got the ultimate experience in the end, but I think he made a fairly good impression that first interview. Do you think there was the first one? Was it the pre-home? His first home game?
I think people were furious when he was appointed, mostly for not being David Wagner, and then it was like, oh, actually seems okay. So yeah, I mean, it was an okay first impression, but then obviously you see the Reading game, which was one of the worst performances of the whole season, and then he was on to a hide into nothing from there. I think
Nakayama, does he know Nakayama's name yet?
I think
it's
after
just a Japanese left-sided centre back.
I think after that, the Hull game when he went on that rant, I think that was quite divisive. Some people loved it, some people hated it and felt he was throwing people under the bus. But it was obvious, I think, sort of throughout that the players weren't having him, basically, is the long and short of it. And I think the biggest thing as well on the pitch, I think there was a certain point where it's like you come in and you see that Reading game and it's like, okay, he's not had long with the squad. You can't put too much of that on him. They then have that Luton game where there is an absolute shambles. Luton Mbete as one of the worst performances I've ever seen from an individual player, which isn't his fault. He's a kid playing his second or third professional game at that point. He shouldn't have been thrown into that situation. And you're thinking, right, they need to tighten it up. They tighten it up. And then you think, right, next stage now. Come back from the World Cup. We'll see something different. Like, you've tightened it up. You've got through the injury crisis. Let's see something different. And we never did. We never saw any development from
Is that what the game was?
What for me, again, going back to coaching mentality and the modern way of doing things now, like, we sort of changed, even under, you know what I mean, my arch enemy Lee Clark. You know what I mean? With Blackie and stuff. Training changed, you know what I mean? With Sam Allardyce, training changed. You weren't getting run to death every single day. Every run you did had a purpose. Everything was tracked and done, and you knew why you were doing that running. And he comes and said, yeah, we've got Marbella, wherever they went. Yeah, run them into the ground. Oh, well done. That's showing your tactical nous that you took a team to the boiling hot weather, run them to death and brought them back to freezing cold England again. So it was, I just found the whole, what he was saying, he tried to go to the crowd that aren't really there anymore.
We used to coin it Fozzie Bingo, didn't we? Because it was just all cliches and he'd say the same sort of thing every week, didn't he? It was...
Big problem was there's only so many times you can sort of talk about how respected you are in Germany without somebody saying, why don't you fuck off back there?
And also, he also kept talking about how many playoff finals he had, and some of them were relegation playoffs.
I went to Hertha Berlin in, I think, February time, and I thought it's my mission to find someone, because I'd had a good drink, like, who knew this guy, and no one had ever heard of him. But you'd think he were like the next best... Pep Guardiola. But the thing is with Huddersfield, it reminded me a little bit of Phil, really, when he came in, Phil Hodgkinson, where I think Huddersfield Public, you need to get off, I think, on the right foot. And yeah, you can say results, but we've had managers before who've delivered results and people haven't liked them. Lou McCarry, for me, is another one. So straight away, obviously, Matt knows a little bit more than me, but straight away, people had turned against him, and we might come on to Sorba Thomas later, but I find it in Huddersfield, once the crowd have turned against a player or a manager, that they ain't coming back from that, and they'd made the decision a long time ago. And to be honest, I try and always support a manager. You wouldn't have had David Wagner if I'd have been in charge. I'd have kept Chris Powell on a 10-year contract. I'm a backer, not a sacker, but it just got to a stage where, something kind of had to change. But every time it looked like we're on his way out, he'd fluke a result. I mean, that QPR game when they had I think they had about 40 shots and Josh Ruffles just pulls that out of the fire. Yeah. They were incredible, and then his finest hour in January, I've still got my T-shirt. I was there when Florian Camberi scored, at Preston. And he's run to the dugout and he's jumped in his arms, Matt, and it just showed the bond between players and manager that you don't think were there, mate.
Then he kicked the ball out of play 3 times with his wrong foot.
Yeah.
Camberi, and he kept running to areas you think... And the Sheffield, I have a lot of Sheffield Wednesday fans going my salon.
Who are they talking
about? They laughed when he came in and said he's the worst player they've ever seen.
Florian
I think the thing for me, we just kept...
striker.
Oh.
We just never offered anything going forward, and he wasn't armed with the greatest weapons. But the Sorba Thomas situation was a very odd one. I know the crowd were a big maybe factor in them going, but they'd really turned against him. And God, Town have wingers that the crowd hate, and then they've gone.
I think part of that was, I mean, let's be honest, 90% of it was Fotheringham didn't like him.
Let me tell the story, Steve.
Tell the story, David.
I can tell you one of the things, he watched Sorba Thomas jump down three steps, and he was wearing flip-flops. And he gave him a lecture about how can I go to the fans and tell them if you injure yourself, you've got to think about being a professional footballer 24/7. And you just think, what are you giving us in the dugout that a spicy pepper army wouldn't? Because there was no level of coaching. He was just pissing people off left, right and centre and stuff like that. You know, you've got to judge people's character. And Sorba Thomas is not somebody... I've spoke to him a couple of times, but I've really spent any time with him. But even I know it. I don't think he's somebody you sort of get right on his back and ride really hard to get the best out of him. He just doesn't. He's just not that sort of personality. So how he couldn't see that, I've no idea.
You can't treat everyone the same way. Even Ferguson knew that you had to treat Cantona like Cantona. You know, you had to make exceptions for him. And I know Sorba's a very divisive figure at the moment, but we all know that on his day, he can be Town's best player. And you've got to do what you can. The fact that he gave up on him so quickly, several months into his reign, rather than trying to find a way to get the best out of Sorba is a bit of an indictment.
He was right about Matty Pearson, though. He kept mentioning Matty Pearson all the time, but whether Matty Pearson had to give the 110% that way, it's given Warnock under... Fotheringham, I don't know, and he never really had him.
I know he scores a lot of goals, but again, I think it speaks to the issues under Fotheringham that he looked at that team who couldn't score if you let them play 10 games back to back on a single evening, and you think, yeah, Matty Pearson's going to be the answer to this. This is going to crack things wide open in the final third.
I was still having the faith. Maybe I need to see a doctor, but that Preston North End game, I know we're only a cup game, and he made a lot of changes, but the fact that they made a lot of changes. Are we just sunk there? We gave it away, and it was really deflating coming out of that ground. And then the week after the Hull game, where that was a real body blow, a huge blow that, because Hull were poor, but we just kept sat back. I think we were nearly in River Humber, weren't we? At the end, we were that far deep, and then the week after I went to Coventry, not many did. Honestly, the way followings, how bad they were under Fotheringham, but. That was the one, Matt, where I think you were mentioning there, but it was the first time I'll give him a bit of piss where he was really upbeat after that. He gave a straight. I think he attacked a few players or a few things, but I just walked away thinking, mate, I can't agree with this. Even, I think obviously you'd seasoned it before, and from that moment, that Coventry game, I thought that's when we should have changed it. Maybe after Preston.
I think going back to one of your earlier points, though, as somebody obviously who's played, and I had a little spell where I didn't have the full back of the crowd when I did tell a few people to go and fuck themselves, so it didn't go down very well at a game. But I think there is a comeback. I think if you work hard, get your head down and prove that you are there for this shirt, regardless of some bad form, even a bad comment or two, especially with social media now, you can easily make a mistake. And I think people are forgiving if they see, regardless of what's going on behind the scenes, anything, that you're doing the best you can possibly can every single time you go out there. I just think when you're down tools because you're a bit pissed with the manager, I think that's when fans go, not being funny, mate, you're still getting paid, we're still coming to see you. And you still should be given 100% every single week, regardless if, your manager's not giving you the full respect you deserve.
Ultimately, it's all results, though, isn't it? I mean, I put up with it for a certain amount of time and sort of held fire a few times because I worked out the points per game that Town needed at the time he was appointed to get to 50 points and stay up. And for quite a while, particularly after those wins over just after Christmas, he was actually tracking just about on it or slightly ahead or just slightly behind, but pretty much on it. But then obviously January, February, it drops off and he was miles off it. And it was like, you are, particularly after drawing against Blackpool when they'd gone ahead twice.
We'll come to that in a minute.
Against 10 men and they lost their two best players.
Was kind of unforgivable and I think was the clearest indication we could have got that he isn't going to turn them around to the degree that is required.
Just before that as well, he got the January transfer window as well, didn't he? And we described the summer one as a mixed bag. This is a bag of shit, this one, isn't it? The January window. You've got Florian Camberi, who they actually had him training with him for 2 months and still decided to sign him, which was miraculous.
But he'd worked with him before, hadn't he?
He thought he could get the best out of him.
Well, my boss is Dom Howson, who covered Sheffield Wednesday last year, and he's a Town fan, and he had his head in his hands that they were considering signing Camberi.
Right, so we have Florian Camberi, Anthony Knockhart, another one. Sorry, Dave, it just didn't work out for your favourite man.
Good
Do not say a word against that man in this arena. No, it didn't work out. I think there were personal reasons why it didn't work out, and I think
some footballing ones as well. I think.
Yeah, there were
you
one
can't
or two
really criticise
ones.
when it's
There were personal reasons. I just don't think Neil Warnock is the manager for Anthony Knockout. Put it that way.
But also Warnock is very big, has always been very big on if a player has an issue or has an issue with their family or whatever it might be, he's always go and sort that out, take care of that. The football doesn't matter, and I think that's basically what happened with Knockout. It happens sometimes. It is what it is.
Matt Lowton as well. Matt Lowton, sort of 12 months earlier, was Premier League right back, and then he fell off a cliff. He was like a lemming. He fell right off a cliff, didn't he?
Town played Burnley in the FA Cup last year, and I thought he was rubbish. Yeah. And then he came in and he did all right, didn't he?
They put him left back though, didn't they? And he just couldn't handle it.
And then he was shocking. There was multiple games in a row where he was at fault for the goals.
In the air, yeah.
Really bad. Really bad.
But I always say he's a right back and they put him left back, but he's in his mid-30s. You should still be able to tackle someone.
Should know where to
stand.
You
should still know where your man's. We're talking about looking over your shoulder, Kamara, at a young age. When you're in your 30s and you've been a Premier League footballer, you still can have a look where your man is, regardless on the other side. I just think he was just, I don't know if he was already retired. And he just came to get a bit more, but it just didn't work, did it?
To be fair to him, I know I'm very critical of him. To be fair to him, I think he's played about 2 games in the last 2 or 3 years. So, it is, again.
Yeah, but there again.
But he was rubbish.
There again, you've got to say, if you're using that as the excuse, you've got to say, well, why sign him? Why sign it?
Just to round up we got Thomas Vatslik came in, started off quite.
Well, apart from the media team killing him with that video of his gammy leg, then he did all right. He did about as mobile as I am right now, and say I can't move. But I think the experienced who came in, Blokovic did well. That Birmingham game, it was superb. Set the goal up as well, and he made a couple of decent saves. Then he let 8 goals in 2 games. You're thinking, and I think it was steady. He didn't do anything spectacular. He had one man of the match performance against Blackburn, and I think he was steady without being fantastic. But you're never going to sign a decent keeper on a contract when you've got Lee Nichols coming back, because you ain't playing, because obviously Nichols is the top keeper in the Championship. So I think it was very hard for anyone to go, right, you can come, but as soon as Lee's shoulder's all right, then you are going to be watching football again.
Yeah.
Joseph Hungbo, though, came in and, honestly, it just makes me smile. I just remember that interview we did with the club. I'm all about entertaining. I thought, wow, this is a confident guy coming into a team that is on its arse. And I just thought, God, stuff like that's going to come back to haunt you, mate. But I'm obviously coming to Warnock later, but amazing impact straight away, one of that Birmingham game. And then he disappeared out of Warnock's planning, and I thought, does he do enough kind of tracking back? But Warnock's just a master, isn't he? And he brought him back at the end and got the best out of him. And he'd be someone I'd really love to see. You never know with wingers, do you? And plus, when they're playing for their contracts,
that'll get us to Kamara later on. But Kungbo had come from Ross County, which is the end of the world. Then you fall off it, and Ross County's there in Scotland. That's where I scored my goal. There you go, Kosi, there's something for you. So coming down to Huddersfield, he is going to be very enthusiastic. But I like him, and I don't think he was lazy. I thought he was quite strong. I thought he was physical. I thought he got in people's faces. He scored some great goals. But as you say, we can't really argue with what Warnock did.
No, the only thing that kept Hungbo out was Corona was miles better than anyone expected, particularly defensively. I thought Corona was absolutely fantastic towards the end of the season. I know we're going to talk about him later, but Hungbo, I think using him as sort of an impact sub and then occasionally using him in certain games was the right move.
And Mr. Warnock did say he's not on very much money, so he is someone maybe Town can afford in going into the next season.
I'd love them to sign.
And then I remember refreshing my Twitter feed just Saturday morning thinking, surely we've finished our business. And the beautiful, gorgeous man that is Martin Wagon appeared, which every other fan were telling us how good he were going to be. And you know what? I was so drunk that Norwich game, which I thought, what a lob, what a goal. That is incredible. And I watched it 2 days later sober. I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, that's probably one of the biggest own goals that we've ever seen. But he ran and he worked. But again, just like Lowton, mate, he was at the end of his career.
He was there as cover for Wardy because Wardy was injured. From what I hear, Wagon was actually brilliant in the dressing room as well, to be fair.
He's a good lad.
Yeah, really, really professional, but can also have a laugh. He was great for that dressing room. So Fine.
First should have brought Coco the Clown in then, that'd have been cheaper.
Yeah, there's someone here. There's someone here I don't even know, Matt. Is this definitely? Did we sign Jordan Smith?
Yeah,
keeper, wasn't it?
I'll tell John Smith.
Is that Forest keeper?
No, I was speaking to his goalkeeper coach, Gavin Ward, who was with him there. And again, like Waghorn, but only doesn't play. Just a great lad, great trainer, very hard to beat in training. Not a first team keeper, and just teams like to have quality third choice, second choice keepers to make sure that the quality in training is right there. And Smith was just a nice, cheap option because they had young lads who were never gonna play, maybe not up to it in training as well. And when you want to keep a nice, sharp training session, he's one of the lads you want in there.
That's good. He didn't get a job where you don't do any work, but you just make everyone laugh.
They knew he was going to play, but Clem just wanted
Yeah.
another trainer in there. So, and yeah, that's what Jordan Smith is.
And Sorba left us not to a real rival, but obviously Blackburn, I think it was at the point of no return, really, wanted with obviously following what you've said there. And I think the crowd had like make their mind up. And yeah, he went across to Ewood Park when Sumbo came in, but
where he belongs.
Oof. It's not about to come back.
I think he said a few things. I think there's a way back for Sober Thomas.
Yeah.
I think he can come back, and I think he can smash it in pre-season and get going again. He's young. Well, he's not that young, but naive with his comments. I think that was more geared towards Fotheringham than it was towards Huddersfield Town, to tell the truth. I think he was having a dig at a useless manager, stroke coach, stroke 100%. Whatever the hell he was. And I think it was more geared towards him. And I'd like to see him come back with a proper manager who's not, you know what I mean, off play days. And I
think over the course
and get back to his top form again.
His heart's in the right place, Sorba, but he has come from non-league ultimately. He was in non-league until his early 20s, and occasionally a little bit of that pokes through. But his heart's in the right place, I think, Sorba.
Steve, what did you think of that World Cup thing? Because that seemed to be held against him, and I didn't see a lot wrong with it.
The idea that he was plays for his by the World Cup.
He plays for his country, and he wants his country to be another country. He
got 7 assists before he went to the World Cup.
No, I meant in that comment though. That really riled everyone up. To me, that was finished when he said that England. I'd love it, kind of, if I beat him.
What comment?
Love to beat England.
What, a Welshman would love to beat England.
Yeah,
shock horror.
Yeah, honestly, what's the outrage and the hatred? I think that's where it kind of become a
bollocks to that.
I think the comment of me and my agent have spoken about my.
No, I don't mean that, Matt. But I meant him from like his disappearance. So this time the fans, if they were against him, then it were like. Right, obviously most people are English to support Huddersfield. It's like right,
that completely passed me by, Kosi.
Right,
and it's bollocks.
You need to get Instagram.
Of course, he wants to beat England. He's playing for his country at the World Cup. Of course, he wants to fucking.
To be fair, do you know what, Dave? I genuinely didn't think anyone would get angrier than Matt Glennon when you mentioned Fotheringham's name. There's like a shade of red every time you mention his name. Because
even though we do get paid to go watch these games, don't make it any easier.
It's another shade gone on top there, but yeah. But Stephen's topped that off there.
No, I think with Sorba Thomas.
He's right.
I was just going to say on Sorba Thomas, you know, I'm with Matt. I do think there is a way back. I think he's a very, very good player. I think he has to be managed a certain way, it would be fair to say. And I think if he gets the right manager, then he's a very, very talented player to just let walk out of your football club, really. And as for that comment, I mean, I'll be honest with you, Kosi, that comment completely passed me by as well. But, you know, he wants to hear what I say about the Welsh.
Right, I think what we'll do is we'll move on to the fourth award that we've got. We've got the low point of the season, and I think it's probably timed quite well. Kosi, I'll give this over to you, and you can take us through the low point.
This is a top 20, not top 5.
Yeah, I've got to say it's been proper narrowed down from 20 to 5. So what about this one? Number 5, Rolando Aarons. Nearly 3 years of payments to this legend. Another Steve Bruce, it were like, people tell us Mick Wadsworth were going to be good. One Steve Bruce said they were going to be good. Going off Harrogate Town, never be seen again, 1.6%. Did anyone go to that Harrogate game? Oh, an hands off. Yeah, I hope you got a selfie, man. Blackpool home defeat to Hawkeye on that awful Sunday, number 4. That finished Danny Schofield off 9%. Number 3, the 1-0 defeat at Wigan, 16.9%. Number 2, losing 4-0 to Coventry and doubting Neil Warnock. Oh, don't look at my Twitter feed in March. That was 27.1%. But the winner, I bet there were so many of us there. Blackpool away, losing the lead twice to 10 men, 40.4%. thought I mentioned that before that game, there were loads of Sheffield Wednesday fans heading to Fleetwood telling us that they were already promoted in this Manchester bar. And I was saying, you never know in football, and I'd love to meet them again. But that Blackpool game, a lot of people mention the Wigan game as like the end of it, but it was incredible drama. That, I mean, what a goal from Josh Koroma, who just stood there. To me, just turned around to everyone's just going nuts, and it's almost like we've got out of jail there against 10 men. It kind of felt like we were a message to the crowd, and then all of a sudden, I think, was it Headley that dived in, and then Lowton missed, or Hellick, or Tom Lees? God, it was horrible.
I'd slightly disagree with that. I think Wigan away, because Chico came in, you thought, right, here we go. It is a Chico, yes, whatever. Comes in, and like we all like him, local fella, and he seems a great fella apart from the fact he's disappeared now. But the way he set up the team that day against the crappy Wigan, that was a long 4 hours of radio. Long day. And I just thought, come on, son, go after him. Go make a name for yourself. And I just thought that was horrendous. Whereas Blackpool at least had some excitement and something happened. The crowd were up for it. There was a lot of town fans there. And yes, it showed Fotheringham for the man he is, because he brought, 3-4 subs on in the last stages, where when we get onto Warnock, we'll find that sometimes he never made a sub and still got the result.
There were that group of 5 games, wasn't there? I think it started with QPR, didn't it? And then we knew we had to get a good all. And to me, the Blackpool one was kind of the one that ended. But just what I want to kind of ask you, Stephen, because you touched on kind of struggling kind of a bit with your mental health this season. And it got to a point for me where I were kind of missing games. I would go watch Scarborough. I was doing something that was just trying to get a bit of positivity kind of into my life on a Saturday. And I found it really difficult to deal with, to be honest with you. Some of the stuff, the crowd were shit, were going down, the abuse that the players got, you know, it was absolutely toxic, mate. And I could kind of escape from it on a Saturday, but you guys have got to report on it, go to the games, kind of deal with it. I'm damn sure your inboxes were getting, you know, what's going on with Dean Oil, etc. But how much does it take out of you as kind of reporters, that this kind of stuff? Because we all want town winning, but it got to a stage where I just kind of had to walk away from it from a few games because it was doing my mental health no good.
Yeah, it's difficult when it's difficult to write when the team is winning every week, because you run out of things to say, and it's even more difficult when the team is losing every week because you run out of things to say and everyone's miserable. So, but no, it is rough. You go into the club. I go to work at the training ground. If I've had a press conference, I'll stick around for a few hours and work at the office there. And obviously, when you're on a losing streak, spirits are down. You know, you see people around the training ground, and it's unpleasant to be through. To be honest, and for me, I think that the difficulty is that when things are bad, you inevitably get more fans sort of on Twitter and on email, particularly with things happening off the pitch as well, coming out and saying like, why aren't you reporting on this? Why aren't you writing about that? Why aren't you reporting about this? It's like, because there's now to say at this stage, but that's when you get, to be honest, the dickheads come out, is when things are bad. And that's what gets me down more than anything. I can live with the stuff on the pitch, but it's when that turns into toxicity among the fans, that's when it starts affecting me.
I let 7 in against Grimsby Town once of Halifax in the last year of my career. That really hurt. Yeah, so things like that are more painful. You just got to take it what it is, because when things aren't going right, everyone has their opinion. You have people who want to go that way, people want to go that way, there's people in the middle. And that's one of the main reasons I enjoy the job that I do. Because I love everyone's opinions when it's right up there and it's, oh my God, everyone wants hanging. So everyone should be given a knighthood. And you get the in-betweens as well. And for me, it don't bother me at all. It annoys me when I see, you know what I mean, charlatans getting jobs that shouldn't get jobs and lasting longer.
Them again, isn't it?
No names. But for me, it's when the fans are sort of getting cheated out what they're paying the money for to watch every week. And it's not always the player's fault. It's not always the manager's fault. Sometimes the culmination of things. But ultimately, as long as you keep it in the barriers of, you know what I mean, we're not chucking out death threats, things like that, everyone's allowed their opinion and they can say what they want. You just got to realise that everyone is different. And me and you'll watch a game, we'll see a very different thing, as we spoke about many a time. And for me, that's the way it is. You got to take the rough with the smooth.
I think it hit everyone, didn't it? Because there were, I think, 3 weeks in a row we didn't do a podcast, did we? And it wasn't because we didn't have the time. It was because we just didn't want to. And I thought the best thing during that period is not one person came to us and went, "Are you doing a podcast this week?" It's like everyone just knew. It's just like there's just no point talking about this nonsense again and again. Yeah, Brady still did his. Yeah, Brady's getting drunk and aggressive down there. It's that time of night. But what we'll do, I think it's a good time to take a break now, isn't it? So if you want to get to the bar and get a couple of drinks, and then we'll start again in about 10 minutes or so.
Who are we talking about next?
We are talking about someone special next, aren't we?
Me?
No. Right, guys, thank you very much. Welcome back to part 2. And finally, it starts to get a little bit more fun, doesn't it? Because we've got Brady joining us. So hello to Brady.
That's not why it's more fun.
Yeah, it is. It was fun because Neil Warnock arrived, didn't he, on his steed. He was pretty much
Ronnie Jepson a steed,
a noble steed.
Just carries him around like a little.
So he came, he got the job, which was amazing. And I went down to speak to Ronnie because obviously Ronnie was assistant to Stan Turnant when I was there. Them fun times, and so I'm chatting to Ronnie, and he comes over, Neil. I don't know him, you know what I mean. So we shake hands, and I had a 10-minute conversation with him, and it was like a breath of fresh air. He just said, he spoke to Vaslik and said, "Are you all right?" And the goal coach says, "I'm not sure." He said, "Well, fuck you then, you're not training. And you're not playing." Blocker pitch comes in, does really well, the Birmingham game. Obviously, Vaslik comes back in through his experience, but it was just no nonsense again. It's like, if you want to play for me, then play. I rang Danny Ward and said, "Are you fit?" "Yes." Because I have this thing about physios as well. They're a bit overprotective at times. You know your body. You know what it's going to do, what it can't do. Yes, hamstrings, things like that, you've got to be careful. But mainly, you know yourself, especially in your 30s. Can I get through 90 minutes? Danny Ward said yes. No, I can't right now. Thank you. The shake of the head. I think, was that me or you?
I imagine in a circumstance like that as well, a player like Danny Ward wants to play, and he's like, "Well, if I get injured, I get injured, but I want to give it a go."
But if you ask the physio, they'll say no.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. Whereas Warnock's just gone straight over their head. Do you want to play? Also, Hellick hadn't played for a couple of weeks. He asked him, "So you can do a job?" "I'll do a job." They all had a great day, and it was a fantastic first game. You know, and I just felt, regardless of what happened at Burnley, which I didn't agree with the setup there, I thought he got that wrong. But it doesn't matter, because ultimately they got there. But just that 10-minute conversation of lack of bullshit, which I'd listened to with Fotheringham for a few months. You know what I mean? It was just great to listen. I care about winning. I don't give a shit what's happening in training, because training doesn't matter. You don't win anything in training. You know what I mean? You might win a fiver off your teammate for goals, but it's match day. All about match day. And Warnock gets that.
And what you could see as well when he came in, and we'll talk about the first press conference that he did, you could see him initially the little things he was doing, trying to lighten the mood of everybody, wasn't he? He was trying to build confidence and make people smile, and you could just see he was like a puppet master, just pulling the right strings all the time. So clever.
He was just so casual, and I think that was sort of the first thing, and I'm sure that went across the players as well. You'd ask him, "Do you think you can keep Town up?" And he's like, basically like, "Don't know, but we'll give it a go." And it's going to be difficult, but we'll try. And I think that was really canny to come in straight away and just be like, "Well, I've got nothing to lose here, really." And I think that, and Matt can probably speak to this, but it sounds like you just made it fun for the players again. And that must go such a long way in terms of confidence. And
the training ground changed on day one. It changed on day one because the intensity levels were up there. There was a clear plan. And, you know, if people say about footballers, not always the brightest in the world, not quite as true as it used to be back in my day, but you've got to make it clear, you've got to make it plain. You've got 15 games. You could not be coming in with the world's biggest tactics board and saying, "You're doing this, you're doing that," and map out 95 minutes of football. Because, for one, you switch off in the first 5 or 6 minutes anyway, so it's not always going to get through. But he's got a tried and tested measure, and he's not the Neanderthal people think he is. He'll come in, shout and scream, "Boothie, go and hold the kettle and that'll warm your hands up," that kind of video that we've all seen back in the day. He's got a way of doing things. It's his way of doing things, and it works, and hence the promotions that he's had in his career.
I've never seen anything like that press conference either. You know, it was basically, it was over an hour. I think it was an hour and 15 minutes. It was meant to be, it was nominally a pre-match press conference, by the way. I think every national sent someone. There were journalists there that I've never seen come to Huddersfield before. I've never seen that press room so full. I think I was the only person who actually asked any questions about the game at the weekend. and was asking about injuries and things. I thought that's my role here, is ask, is anyone going to miss out injured? But it was, I'm sure everyone watched it, and I think the version the club put out even snipped 15 minutes off the end, because it was like, all right, I think it devolved into talking about having Negronis in New York and watching jazz. And it was just so much more. You sort of got the sense, we knew this when Warnock was appointed, even if they go down, it's going to be fun now. And that was such I know that was a weight off my shoulders, and I'm sure it was a weight off everyone here as well.
Yeah, I mean, from the fan perspective, chatting to my friends, like how exciting that was when he was announced, because it kind of, came out of the blue. And this kind of summed up the season. Like, we've obviously it's finished amazing now, but how down everyone was, and we don't need to go over it. But, they announced that it was going to be live streamed. And like, we were all like, oh, we're going to watch this, or we're going to watch this. And in how the season had gone so far in typical Town fashion, it was 15 minutes late. They started the live stream and they had to cut it off after 2 minutes because it wasn't working. So it's like, oh, what is going to go right? But that press conference, it was incredible. I mean, like you say, it just made everything fun. And to be honest, you talked about him being in the jazz club and having Negronis, and I'd rather hear that, because Town was shit,
Exactly. And like, it took me a little bit of time, and Dave can confirm this. Took me a little bit of time to get used to him, because I think you had to sort of learn how each manager communicates and what sort of questions they're going to respond to. And I learned quite early on, if you ask Warnock a tactical question, there's a better than 50-50 chance he's just going to answer it with an anecdote about something that happened 20 years ago. So there's no point. Whereas Carlos, I used to ask him tactical questions just because I wanted to know, and it's like, no one's going to read this, but I want to know. But I learned with Warnock, there's a certain way you have to approach things with him, and it was really, really enjoyable for me, sort of getting used to him and getting to know him a little bit.
The other thing is, I think, let's have it right, Town were dead and buried.
Yeah, absolutely.
They were dead and buried, and I think you've got to give the club a little bit of credit. We've kicked them for the last two. They went and did the only thing possible to keep them up, I think. We said it on our podcast. I don't think there's anybody else who would have been able to do what he did. I mean, it was a bigger comeback than your hair in lockdown. But it was...
It's not my hair, but yes.
Yeah. And I think coming from that position afforded him a little bit of relaxation, to be honest with you, because he was really relaxed. Despite the pressure, even after Burnley and Coventry, he never really looked like he was really feeling it. He was just trying to do what he could do. And I think what Matt said is probably the most pertinent point. With Warnock, it's all about the match day. It's all about that game. And I think the way Town had to approach with that run of fixtures from where they were is to just set up from game to game. There was no time for philosophies or structures or frameworks or anything like that. It was time to just do what needed to be done to get a result from week to week.
Also, talking like say, we come from managers who know what they're doing and not. What the lads are doing now when they got this time off, well, they've got 4 days off, 5 days off. I mean, the thing with the young coach, I'm not talking about Fothers now, I'm talking in general, the obsession with being at the training ground 24/7, morning session, technical session, video session, everything else session, go home at 5 o'clock, you know what I mean? It would have killed me, because I used to watch Quincy at 2 o'clock with Stan Turner, would be on that early. But it's not an obsession. We work hard, we do what we need to do, get home. It's now 2/3 of the season through. You don't need to be here 24/7. Go and relax, go and see your family. When we come back next time, make sure you're refreshed, ready, because, like we're saying, it's about match day, not about endless hours at the training ground.
And you're not going to get them any more fit, even if you do work them into the ground at that point in the season, are you?
Well, no, because they've had 5 days running Marbella, so you don't need to run anymore.
But, yeah, I think, though, that he obviously is this great man manager, this great motivator, and that is the main thing about Neil Warnock, obviously. But I think tactically he does get overlooked sometimes, because he does certain things that like no other manager in the Championship does. I remember a couple of years ago when Carlos was doing his man-to-man thing that he inherited from Bielsa, and it was getting massive plaudits for that, and isn't this interesting? First half of his first season, that is, not the second half. The only other manager in the league that was doing that was Neil Warnock at Middlesbrough. So he does have he has learned and picked up these things over 40 years. And I think the only person who seriously calls him a dinosaur is himself. at this point. But
and Sheffield Wednesday fans.
And Sheffield Wednesday
and
fans.
Swansea fans.
Bristol City.
But he will use innovative stuff. He uses stuff that's up to the minute, and he more often than not got it right than got it wrong.
And putting the players in the right places to do the right thing and motivate them into doing what they needed to do. And you could see it, and you talk about like tactical. The second half of games was so different than the first. That Middlesbrough game, I know Ruffles gets his little bit of luck with a couple of rebounds, but the fact he's in that position to run there anyway when they've sat back as much as they haven't, it's you know what I mean. It's crazy to think he's that much confidence in his first half 45 that we're probably not going to concede. If we do, we're still going to get 2 in the second half because I know what we're going to do. They don't know what I'm going to do. They don't think I'm going to send this group of underachievers out there. And I said all the way through the season, Town had the players, they're just not the right person. And you could see that with your Radoni things and other players. You thought, where's he been? Well, he was probably at left back for half of it when he's a right winger. So it's putting the right people in the right places, giving them clear instructions and enjoying it. Ronnie's great as well. You know what I mean? Ronnie can't be overlooked in all this. He's always smiling. He's got that big moon head of his there as well. And he's brilliant. And he's always lively. He's very, very aggressive. Very aggressive. But in a fun way. He will, in training, do anything. He'll run right through you and he's making his points and stuff like that. But you will be left in no uncertain terms what you're supposed to do. And that's what you want as a player. And if you're not going to be in his squad, you also know that as well. So you know it's not me today, it might be next week. And you're not left wondering at 1 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, am I going to be in the squad today? Was it a waste of time going to bed at 9 o'clock? You already know.
There was just so much more freedom about them in attack. And I think that boiled down to a really simple instruction. And he's talked about this and Radoni's talked about this as well. Just do what you do well. And if it doesn't work, fine, just try it again. I don't care. Just try it again. And he said, and yeah, Headley said that, Radoni said that, and you could see the players were doing that. And again, the confidence that they take from that, where it's like, oh, I'm doing what I do well, and it's working. And then suddenly everyone sort of comes to life and starts to believe, actually, we can win. We're good footballers. We're championship footballers. We can win games.
I think the other thing is don't underestimate the power of just talking to players. Because I don't think, so I'm going to use his name again, Matt. I don't think Mark Fotheringham was very good at it.
We talked at people,
exactly.
and that's not just Mark Fotheringham. That is a thing that's sort of creeping through with young coaches now. How big a word can I use to describe a 4-4-2? You know what I mean? How can I make things really complicated where I sound really intelligent to everyone else, whereas he just talks to you like a bloke in the pub,
exactly,
and you get on with it.
And I think we've heard anecdotally stories about just sitting in the gym for 3 hours chatting to players. And that sort of thing, it's completely valuable in terms of relaxing them, in terms of taking the sting out of what was an awful position. An awful position. Like I say, this comeback is unprecedented. Steve ran the stats on it, and it's just, in a literal sense, it's never happened before.
Yeah, I think I could only go back 30 years, that's as far as my spreadsheet goes, but from the position Town were in after the Coventry game, no second-tier side had survived from that position in 30 years, and I suspect probably no side has ever survived from that position since 3 points for a win was introduced.
Yeah. Matt, I was just going to ask you, because obviously you're the ex-player here. For me, from a fan perspective, I think it was just Warnock gave those players belief that Steve touched on there, the confidence. But also, I think he had the reputation, whereas obviously you look at Schofield and Fotheringham, and they didn't have that. How important is that as a player to be given that belief by the manager? Does it actually, we saw how good the results were. Is that a big part of it?
In the first few weeks, yes. And then if you've got the skills to actually make people buy into what you're doing, yes. If you're a big name, you walk through the door, then everyone realises, wow, you're clueless. That will get seen quite early on. But when you've got Warnock, tried, tested, done everything there, he comes in. You think, I've only watched you on TV before, like Radoni, people I've never met him before, never worked, just heard stories, seen YouTube crap and all that. The thing he's come in, he's actually speaking to me like a human being and like a professional footballer, and he's given me the respect. He knows who I am, he knows what I'm doing, and that goes a hell of a long way, because you think, chest comes out, you're on your toes. Bloody hell, this legend of football, as much as some people, don't like him, more people do like him, it's just that instant respect that he gives you as well. You know who he is. You know his name when he comes in. You know, when Mark Fothers comes in, it took me a week and a half to remember his name. You know what I mean? It was like that, and I've seen that at many clubs before. You're thinking, wow, I have to Google him again. It's like Huddersfield Town second year in the Premier League. When I'm Googling these players, thinking, is he actually a footballer? Well, I'm talking obviously Dear Carbies and people like that. And Warnock just instantly walks in, Ronnie walks in, and it's like your two best mates have walked straight in the change room, but your two best mates who have had 7 championship promotions and have been a Premier League manager and has come in and knows your first name and starts speaking to you.
And I'm sure even before he walked in, every one of those players will have had messages from someone they know or have played with before who said, "Oh, you're going to fucking love playing for."
Well, with Danny Ward, he'll be in the middle of the thing going, "I'm playing next week." I don't know about you lads, but I'm back in the team.
I mean, because I had 5 journalists messaging me who had not spoken to for years saying, "You're going to love this." So I'm sure the players did as well.
I've got a quick question, and that was back-to-back 4-0 defeats under Neil Warnock, Burnley and Coventry. Honestly, hands on the table, did you think we were gone at that point?
After Coventry, yeah, I said as much. I said they were dead and buried, no chance. But for the reason that Dave's pointed out, because no team had ever survived in that position before, and the thing with the Coventry game, the Burnley game, you sort of expected it because Burnley were going to be champions, and I even sort of just like, who cares about this game? Doesn't matter. I think even Warnock sort of treated it that way. He said, unless we lose 6-0, I'm not arsed. But the Coventry game, I actually didn't even think they played that badly. That's the thing. They actually,
it was just one mistake by Halleck.
And then it just
the game changed, which was really weird.
And that was almost worse for me than if they'd just been played abysmally again, because it's like, oh no, this is the best they can do, and they're still getting pumped 4-0. They're screwed here.
Yeah, and I mean from you know, obviously was that the game, and you know, and I know a lot is made from a fan perspective about leaving early and whether that's a thing, but you know, where I was sat, people were fuming, people were, you know, kicking off, people thought this was done, and I think I admitted it online at the time, but I did leave because I just didn't see any way back, and it was frustrating. And I think that was the thing you kind of thought from the fan perspective. If Warnock can't get a tune out of this, you know, then like, what is this season? And to be honest, like, yeah, it just looked done. And
it was also the fixture list as well.
Yes.
That fixture list was horrendous on paper, absolutely brutal, and I think that's what his masterstroke was, that he took the sting out of it from game to game, set up differently from game to game, changed in games effectively and quickly. And yeah, you know, hand on heart, I was right where Steve was at one point. They were dead and buried. They were done. As an analyst, you can only look at what's in front of you, and what was in front of me was a pile of shite.
But every year, though, every team has a run. They have a run, and you go, wow, the 6-7 games, they have a run. Town had their run. There was no run there'd been 1 game, 2 games, that's it. There was going to be a run at some point, and I felt the run was going to come. Obviously not as spectacular as it ended up in, obviously 30 years since do it, but I always felt there was going to be a big portion of games where they were going to do it.
On that, me and Steve felt the same, but we thought the run was going to come too late.
Yeah, and it wasn't being... Because, I mean, just to, again, reiterate the position they were in, they finished the last 10 games of this season, they finished better than they did last season when they reached the playoffs and finished third. It's the best last 10 games of a second-tier season the club has ever had. That's how good that was since 3 points are a win. And that is the scale of the uplift that they had in the results that they basically needed, because remember at that point, Reading hadn't had the points deduction yet. So it looked basically impossible.
So if you say you thought they were going to stay up, you're talking shite.
And Steve gave me a nice segue there to talk about the award for the game of the season. So there's quite a few to pick from, mostly Warnock's tenure, although I did chuck in the QPR game for just Josh Ruffles' incredible goals. Third place, it was Huddersfield Town 1, Sheffield United 0, and I've got here I owe Matt at McDonald's after that game, which is true. So claim that when you want. Anyway, second place, it was Watford 2, Huddersfield Town 3, 13.9%. Love that purely for the Watford goalkeeper Backman losing his head. That was the icing on the cake for me.
I loved that game.
It was incredible.
That game was brilliant.
Yeah.
I laughed my ass off at that game. It was amazing.
It was incredible. And no surprise here, and typical, the only game I missed at home this season, apart from the Norwich game, so 2. Huddersfield Town 4, Middlesbrough 2, 66.3% of the vote. Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that a little bit, because that was incredible, especially... the first Middlesbrough's goal was actually a really worked goal, and I didn't see that second half coming, even though we knew, we had the good result at Millwall. But just what a turnaround, and Matty Pearson, just absolute goal machine.
Yeah, I think we'd seen, obviously, against Millwall, they'd squeezed out that 1-0 win just before that international break. And they came back against Borough, and you're thinking, they're probably going to, if they're going to get out of this, it'll be by squeezing out 1-0s. They don't have goals in them. And then they scored 4 in, 20 minutes?
Yeah.
After the break. And it was, I even asked what my first question was, where did that come from? And I think he was a little bit taken aback, a little bit offended by it. But it was a legitimate question, because I think they'd scored more goals in those 20 minutes than they had in the previous 10 games or something ridiculous like that.
I played with Matty Pearson for a year at Halifax. He could not hit a bando with a banjo. And then suddenly he is Huddersfield Town's goal machine. It's absolute. And he was the year before. Because don't forget, centre half started with Thomas's corners. It was Lee's, it was Nabizar, it was Matty Pearson. It was all headers, corners. And then it sort of disappeared, as did the goals. And then Matty comes. I think Matty finished second in the goal scoring charts. He was out for 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going your way. I mean, I talk about this all the time, but the Huddersfield Town's fourth, where Pearson, it's like dinked over from Ward, and he just hits it, and it, hits Stefan's legs, hits the post and goes in. That's when your luck's going for you. The thing is about Matty Pearson as well, is I love how crap some of his goals are. Like the first for Middlesbrough, where it's like, it just bounces around and he like knees it in, like with this, it's just terrible. Or Fi correctly there. This is the insight you get from me. This is what you want to hear from them.
It's just pure aggression. Yeah. That's all it is. I will kill that ball.
Dave and I both are, privately, our favourite player, both of us, is Matty Pearson. So I say this with the greatest of love. Matty Pearson is a great player, but somehow everything he does looks a bit crap. Yeah. Even though what he's doing is actually really good.
It's agricultural, is that the...
Yeah, that's the word.
He also just, exactly what he's feeling at any single moment of any single day.
He's a cheating little bastard as well, by the way. I'll say that to you now. It's only because he's on our team and he's my mate that I can say that. But my God, the amount of diving and bullshittery that he does on a pitch, and I say it and I own my tongue because I am with the other team for it, and I do let him off a little bit. But yeah, I always say if he was on the other team, then I'd be running on there double footing him myself.
He's also my daughter's favourite player, because the first game I took her to, Matty Pearson was injured, and all the players were walking in, and Bo got photos with a few of them, and she got to talk to a few of them. Matty Pearson walks in, injured, massive bag of Haribo, full fat coat, gives her a signal as he walks by, and just goes and sits in the manager's dugout, gets a banana out, gets another bag of Haribo, and just sits and tucks in for 5 minutes.
Oh dear. So this is where the belief starts coming in, isn't it? This amazing run that we're starting to put together. We beat Middlesbrough 4-2. We'd previously gone to Millwall and won Watford away, and a draw against Blackburn, which we probably scraped, I think, in fairness, even though they scored late on.
Vaslik man of the match, so that
is phenomenal, wasn't it?
Performance.
And
Brilliant on his line, because he can't come off it.
I think this is the part where we think we can actually do this, and there's people now starting to come around. And then there's that 12-day break, isn't there, where we don't have a game, and a few results went a little bit strange, didn't they? QPR winning at Burnley. Well, anyway, everyone getting points off Burnley.
I don't know about that, Matt, because I think I think you earn your luck a little bit in football, and I think one of the things that happened in that run is that other teams were helping you out a bit. At no point did you get cut adrift. It really, the belief was coming not just from what you were doing, it was from looking round and going, yeah, well, everyone else is rubbish too here. So suddenly teams became quite catchable, and I think that helped them mentally as well. Getting off the bottom of that table you'll know, Matt, as a professional, that's got to change you mentally, getting off the bottom of the table finally.
It does, and all the people that say, I never look at the table, liars. Yeah. Everyone looks at the table straight away, get your phone out, see where we are, see the results. And yeah, it does. But it just installed a belief of, we've just beat Middlesbrough, we've beat QPR, the aerial team away, not QPR, so Millwall away as well, where the ball never saw the floor. So we can mix it up. Even the Norwich game in the second half, where that was a pure football match, and they get back in the game as well. So you start thinking, yeah, I'm not as stupid as I think here, thinking I am actually a decent player. He does know what he's talking about. We can get out of this. And you don't have a sense of invincibility, but every time you pull your match day boots on, you're thinking, well, we have got a chance today, because We beat them last week, and they're third in the league, and they're chasing Sheffield United, and we can beat them. I don't care who's in their squad. I don't look at the Watford midfielder on 60 grand a week or anything like that. You're looking and thinking, well, we've beat better, so we can go out and do it today.
I mean, for you guys, what was the turning point, the game? Because Warnock himself said it was Millwall. I mean, I wasn't expecting
Blackpool away, because I knew he was going.
Second half against Norwich.
Yeah.
For me, that was where it all started, and I know that game finished 1-1, and at the time we were still thinking, well, it probably isn't enough because they hadn't had that win, they needed a win. But the first half against Norwich, they'd been a bit crap again, and then second half they absolutely battered Norwich and were really, really unlucky not to win that game.
At half time, when we were losing, we were 8-9 points away, almost drift, weren't we, from the fourth bottom?
Yeah. And if they hadn't pulled that back, but again, it was the performance there. I think if you're looking for a performance, obviously then they go to Millwall and win. And I think in terms of results, that was where the turning point was. But I think for performances, it was that half-time against Norwich.
I'm completely with Steve. I text Steve at half-time in that Norwich game because I wasn't there on the day because I had COVID. And I texted him and said, after watching that first half, I think I actually like COVID because it was terrible. They came out second half, they set up slightly differently, and they earned their luck. And, I am a big believer. You can't quantify luck. You can't quantify the run of the ball. But what I do know is if you start to try and do the right things, if you start to try and actually make a difference to people on the pitch, you do earn something. And it was a huge slice of luck getting that equalised, but I think it was just so important, really. It really was I think when you've been that far down to get a slice of luck like that and then to sort of see it out and get something from that game, it wasn't 3 points, but they got something from that game. I just think that was the moment that subconsciously or consciously, I think just changed things.
Yeah, I mean, depends who you ask, but, Kosi thought it was a great goal by Waghorn. When we could have won that game as well with Norwich, I think that was the thing. We had a couple of chances at the end.
Battered Norwich second half, absolutely battered them.
Thank you, David.
And it was the first time this season that you've actually bombarded someone. Like, that was the thing.
Yeah. And, well, it's probably a good time for Mr. Matt Glennon to talk about the best moment of the season, because there's quite a few to pick from, probably in the last couple of months. So, Matt, do you want to do the honours?
So it was number 3, Neil Warnock return and press conference, got 3.6%, beating Middlesbrough 4-2, 28.9%, and staying up, Sheffield United and Neil Warnock's Guard of Honour, which I thought was slightly weird, but 65.1%.
Why did you think it was weird?
I just found it. I've never seen it before. After 15 games, and it was weird, and it was good and it was bad, because it was good that the players recognised the job that man had done. It was bad in the sense that how bad the other man had done, and you know what I mean. So the two in between, it did feel a bit of a celebration when, yes, you should be celebrating because it is a massive achievement. Everything's been against you, but when you're celebrating staying up in a division, it always feels a little bit. I'm not sure.
I didn't read it that way. I think it was purely appreciation for Warnock and Jefferson.
No, I agree, but it was a celebration, which it should be for the fans and everyone else there. But as a group of players, thinking again, I look at certain players in the squad who did down tools during things, but also say when you're not being coached properly, you're not being set up properly. It's hard. I don't know. It's mixed feelings. I find it when you're celebrating those kinds of things, because end of the day, it was massive. They stayed up with the new owners coming in. You know what I mean? The new impetus is going to be in the club now as well. So it was huge. But you're not celebrating failure as much. But I just feel I don't know. It just felt a bit much.
I think my favourite part about that is if you watch the footage back, it's Hoggy who organises it, and the amount of organisational work he gets through in about 45 seconds to get them in a line. I thought, next time I move house, I'm calling him.
Well, initially the Guard of Honour dropped a bit too deep.
Yeah, it did.
Then he pulled it forward again.
Well, just going on that Sheffield United game, I was so nervous during that game. There was absolutely nothing happening, but because of what was at stake, I was absolutely dying in the dugout. I was so nervous, but we'll go to the goal of the season, the 7th award, and we'll get Mr. C to tell us who Who won that one?
Like a retired submarine captain, Mr. C.
That wasn't good.
2 seconds. Take the microphone
move
off.
on.
In 5, the most overrated goal of the season, in my opinion, but that's by the by. Joe Hungbo against Reading with 7.2%. I could have had a go from 30 yards in that game, the amount of defending.
That keeper was bad, to be fair.
In 4, Josh Ruffles against Borough. In 3, Tino Andrin against West Brom. Number 2 is Josh Ruffles and his overhead kick against Queen's Park Rangers. But of course, number 1, I think partly for the goal, mostly for the significance, is Danny Ward against Sheffield United with 34.9% of the vote.
Not having it.
No.
It would
Danny Ward against Birmingham.
Danny
Isn't
Ward
even
against
in the top
Birmingham.
5.
I know, not even in the top. I think that Danny Ward against Birmingham was the one time this season that Town have really looked like playing above themselves before.
And
Warnock
who was the
came
manager
in.
then?
I'm not upsetting Matt again.
I mean, he wasn't the manager.
Who was the head coach then?
Oh, God.
He wasn't the head coach.
But Steve, obviously, as a journalist, you love your narrative. As Neil Warnock said, Danny Ward is his son. Said that about 60 times at Huddersfield Town Hall. That's really fitting, isn't it, that Danny Ward got the winner? And it was a good goal.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I did vote Danny Ward Birmingham, but it was a good goal to stay up.
Yeah, I think you can't... Look, Danny Ward this season has not been anywhere near the level he was the previous season. And I think, obviously, the injuries he's had has been a large part of that. But even the first half of the season, part of the reason they were struggling was because his finishing was nowhere near the level it had been the previous year. But come the end of the year, obviously, without him, you don't stay up. It's as simple as that. He was so important. It's obviously, I think even a half-fit Danny Ward does a job that no one else in that squad was capable of doing. Jordan Rhodes didn't get anywhere near until the final day when they were already safe. And yeah, just a massively important player to Town. And obviously they're in talks at the moment. Hopefully that gets done, because I think even if you sort of have him playing half the number of games next season, I think you want Danny Ward at the club.
Yeah, and Dave, someone who was really important in this run that we've not really talked about in great detail, Josh Koroma, who I thought was probably the best player for Town that night. He looked incredible, and I think you said in your podcast that you'd maybe let him go, but obviously he's in talks. But just to have a go. But
I think you've got to remember that he's really played well for Town in 2 spells, and the first really good game he had, me and Steve did the podcast after, and we were talking and we were saying, well, he's played like that, but he's playing for a contract, and at the moment, that was absolutely fine, because it's Town who are benefiting. But I think at the moment, do I think he's done enough to justify getting a whacking great new deal for 2-3 years? I just don't. I don't.
Give him a month to month.
or bonus led, yeah.
I think the problem is he needs a certain type of manager who makes him feel a certain way, a bit like Sorba Thomas, but I think to an even greater degree, if I'm honest. And you can't guarantee that at the moment. We don't know who the next Huddersfield Town manager is. We have no inside info on that. We genuinely don't know. And they are all the names that have been spoken about or are in the betting are all very, very different people. So I don't think at the moment you can go and give Josh Koroma a new contract, not knowing who the manager's going to be, knowing full well 3 months into next season, you might have the Josh Koroma that you're thinking, well, in January, is there another Portsmouth out there who'll take him for a few months? So at the moment, I think with Wardy, you've got like a body of evidence where you go, do you know what? He's worth a new contract.
Yeah.
Whereas with Josh Koroma, I think you simply have to be a little bit black and white about it and say, do we have that body of evidence? I don't think we do. As good as he was, his highest highs are arguably higher than anybody in that squad. But is his consistency anything like a Danny Ward?
No.
No.
I agree with that. To put the other side, though, I mean, as you say, those highs are so high. Those goals that he gets are so important to the side. I think his performance against Watford in particular, but also second half against Sheffield United, are 2 of the best centre-forward performances we've seen from Huddersfield Town for years.
Yeah, but you can't give someone a 3-year contract, and then only get 12 months out of somebody.
That's the issue.
And that's it. And he won't be on peanuts for his new contract either. It'll be decent because of what he did. And the problem is his mentality. his mentality's not there. Because we saw for 18 months that he disappeared. And he did disappear. And he down tools and he didn't look fit, didn't look in shape. And then amazingly, as you say, last 6 months of your contract, you're the best player in the world again. And for me, that's a conscious thing, not a subconscious thing. And he's decided I need to pull my socks up because I want my cash and I want a decent club. And it's shit, really. So it's not great. It's brilliant because it got Town in the league and it's brilliant he's kept him. But with, say, Mr. Nagel coming now, we don't know where he's going to be financially, what the club's going to go. But if the club's going to actually spend and back a manager who comes in, then you're right. There's other people out there that will give you what Danny Ward gives you, which is every time he goes out, he might not be the best player in the world, but I tell you what, he'll give it a good go.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is Neil Warnock was the perfect manager to get a tune from a player.
Because he knows how to use people.
To get a tune from a player who's trying to get a contract, who has got all the talent in the world, and is just needed to do a specific job from week to week. He was the perfect manager. And as I said, I just cannot... Listen, like I say, I thought the second half against Sheffield United, I thought he was as close to unplayable as a Championship player gets. But that was 45 minutes of football. And if he had done that 25 times this season, you know, what number do you want on this contract?
Yeah, 25 times over 2 seasons would have been acceptable.
That's it. Yeah. Exactly. But I fully accept that he may well go on somewhere now and quite comfortably become arguably one of the best players in the Championship. But that is not to say if he'd stayed at Huddersfield Town, the same thing would have happened.
He might stay at Huddersfield Town and go on to be one of the best players in the Championship. But that's the point. There's an element of a gamble, and I think if money was no object, you'd say keep him in the squad. But it's the opportunity cost. It's who else could you get for similar wages, and also, do you have to break? Because we know he was in negotiations a couple of years ago, last season, I should say. And it didn't get anywhere. So if they have to sort of break their wage cap and make an exception to keep him, I don't think it's worth it. And that was the point we were making.
Do you think some of that might have been his age, though? We talked about the previous season. Cause
it could be he's just a developing player. Yeah.
Also to do with agents saying that we'll go on a free instead of getting a fee for, and you'll get more money for yourself. So
I do want to say
that as well.
Which his agent does have a tendency to do.
Yeah, that is the other side of it. His agent is famous as an agent who wants his players to run their contracts down and move on frees.
I do want to say as well, Dave, I wasn't necessarily criticising that because I felt like we're all ganging up on me a little bit here.
We are.
Yeah, exactly.
We are.
Yeah, it's always the gingers, always pick on them.
Outside.
Until you stand up and then
exactly.
We've got no issue.
But no, I mean like you touched on his contribution. It kept us at contribution. There we go. I thought you'd bring the conch tonight, Matt. Okay. Anyway,
Right, so I think the last award that we've got is the Player of the Season. Who are we saying Player of the Season? Any shouts? Helic? Anyone else? Chris?
Rudders.
Helic? Rudders. Paul Rudd.
Conor Mahoney.
Conor Mahoney. What we'll do is we'll give... Go on, Matt, who are you saying?
Huh?
Who do you reckon?
It's someone in the back line for me, so I'm Helic as well, probably.
Right, you can reveal all. Who has won the Andy Takes That Chance Player of the Year?
Right, number 5 with 3.6 of the vote is Josh Koroma. Number 4, last year's winner, Tom Lees.
No, it was Pierce. Nichols last year.
Nichols last year, because it was 4.8. Jack Rodoni, unfortunately, Rodders comes in with 9%. Matty Pearson, who played only 15 games, gets 10.2%. And the winner is Mr. Helic with 69.3%. I can't read your writing. Oh, the winner is Van Lepare. Yes, very good. Yeah, I did skip past that. I don't like saying his name anymore, you know that. I have moved on, honestly.
Hello to everyone who is listening to And He Takes That Chance podcast. Michał Helix here. I hope you are well, and I just wanted to say thank you for all your votes and for choosing me your Player of the Year. It means a lot for me, so thank you once again. I wish you all the best and see you next season.
Fantastic. So that's it really. I think for a lot of the podcast, we only have left the role of dishonour. So at the start of the season, we all guessed, didn't we, the 1 to 24. I had a video to go for this, but unfortunately we can't plug it into the projector. But we had everyone here. We threw it out. I think 41 people guessed their 1 to 24 in the Championship.
I hurt myself today to see if I still feel. I focus on the pain, the only thing that's real. The needle tears a hole, the old familiar sting. Try to kill it all away, but I remember everything. What have I become? My sweetest friend. Everyone I know goes away in the end, and you could have it all. My empire of dirt, I will let you down. I will make you hurt. I wear this crown of thorns upon my liar's chair, full of broken thoughts I cannot repair.
I'm quite happy now to roll that into a Q&A. If anybody's got any questions, we can come out to you and feel free to ask. We purposely haven't discussed the takeover yet because we thought the Q&A might be sort of takeover.
There might be a couple of questions, yeah.
Yeah, so Brady does have access to the long microphone and will travel. So Brady, if you want to Annika Rice yourself into the crowd and...
He's also the longest of the panel.
He's got the longest arms as well.
Extra length.
Thank you. Okay, right.
By longest, I mean tallest, just to confirm.
Okay, hands up. Who wants a question? Who wants to come first? Anyone? Come on then. Remember last year when I got annoyed at you?
Well, yeah, before I ask my question, I have to make a comment. I'm an avid fan of Who to Be a Terrier. I listen religiously every week. But I have to say, when it comes to musical recommendations, there's nobody I've ever heard of. There was some decent music in the 60s and 70s, you know.
Yeah, all right. I'll stick some Bowie or some Beatles or some Scott Walker or
Scott Walker?
anything. Yeah.
I definitely won't.
But my question relates more to the other podcast, and he takes that chance. There was a podcast about 2 or 3 months ago during the dark days when we were facing doom and gloom and cause had given up and we're looking at relegation and administration. We were on the market for about £1, but no one could afford £1 because of the debts. The question came up about Dean Hoyle's legacy. And I thought it was a good question, looking back on his 12, 13 years of tenure. Would it be something we look back on favourably? Or was it seen as quite negative? And somebody said, quite wisely, perhaps what will determine Dean Hoyle's legacy is what happens next in terms of succession, who buys the club. Now, it's still early days, and I think we've got a lot of faith in Kevin Nagle to date, but faith is all we have. But I think, from my point of view, what I hear so far, I think if things work out as well as we hope they will with Nagle, then looking back on this Dean Hoyle legacy, it has to be one of positivity for the club. What does the esteemed panel think about that?
I think that's probably about right. I mean, I know things have not gone terribly well the past few years, although obviously playoff final last year. But Dean took them from League One to the Premier League, ultimately. Obviously, when he left the club and sold it to Phil, he was in very ill health, and perhaps was looking to make a sale quickly, and perhaps didn't assess things as thoroughly as he might otherwise have done. He's then come in and effectively saved the club after Hodgkinson's businesses have gone bust, which, he's the 50%, he was 25% owner. He was kind of obliged to save the club, but still stepped in and was the safety net there. And as you say, I think probably having got one sale wrong, and I think in hindsight we can say that, he needs to make sure he's got this one right now, and time will tell. And if he has, I think probably in time that the bad years will fade and people will just remember him as the man who took you to the Premier League.
Yeah, he looked the most relieved man in the world after Sheffield United. He come past me and Oggy in the stands, gave the thumbs up, and you could see he looked exhausted. He just wanted it to be done. I'm not sure the deal would have fell through if they'd have gone down or not. We don't know. But I think Mr. Chicken's right. In the years to come, he will be seen as the man that took him from League One to the Premier League and spent a hell of a lot of money on the way. There was huge mistakes, especially in the second season of the Premier League. I'm not sure Dean could really be acquitted for that because it was the men picking that atrocious set of players that they picked, and he just put his checkbook there. So I can't see him being blamed for that debacle in the second year of the Premier League. But yeah, I think he'll be seen very fondly, and I think he should be. He made mistakes. You bring managers in, you bring coaches in, you listen to recommendations. You don't always, realise how bad they're going to be. Injuries come along, players sign for you who don't quite work out. But on the whole, the club is still in a good position. You know what I mean? They've got a new chairman coming in. They didn't go into administration. They didn't get dot points. They're not Reading. It's survived, and he spent a lot of money bringing Neil Warnock in as well. You know what I mean? Getting rid of the clown shoe Fotheringham and then bringing Warnock in. You know what I mean? That wasn't cheap either. That was something that had to be done at great expense, but it was worth it. He did it. He's kept in the division, so I think we should maybe just think about saying thank you and moving on.
I think in 5 years' time, I don't think anybody will remember sort of 20.
I think if Nagel gets his wallet out in about 6 months' time, I think everyone will be thinking the same thing.
But I think everyone will think back to Hereford away when he was, buying everybody a pint in the pub, singing away, and I think everybody will remember the Dean Hoyle from 2008 to 2017 rather than the one that had to come back in after the sale. And I think his time will be looked at fondly. I honestly don't think there's been a better owner in, well, certainly not my supporting lifetime than Dean Hoyle. So I think he's got to be looked back upon favourably, hasn't he? And I'm sure whenever he's back in Magic Rock or wherever he wants to come, I'm sure there's a pint on for him for every town fan in there.
I was just going to say quick as well, I think it's really easy the way the human brain works to remember the most recent things rather than thinking back at a tenure. And I think the way I'd summarise it would be, if Dean Hoyle hadn't come in 2008, I don't think we'd be sat here in the Championship. I don't think we'd ever have got to the Premier League. I think we could have been a lot lower than League One as well. So I think it's just remembering that as a whole piece and analyse it as a whole piece rather than just what's happened over the last 24 months. I know you've got a great point as well, something else that Dean Hoyle's done massively well for the club as well.
Yeah, I think the other side is away from the football pitch. Obviously, there's things like the Pedal for Pounds, the Town Foundation that he's set up. And again, I know I'm sort of pointing out the positives. I'm not pretending that there haven't been mistakes along the way and things that maybe could have been more involved in and hasn't been, etc. But I think the work that the club do in the community, I think a lot of that was introduced on Dean Hoyle's watch as well, which I think shouldn't really go ignored. Season ticket prices have been kept low, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think just touching on what you guys said there, for me, it's like with these things, it's not black and white. It's not like he did a lot of good things. He also did some bad things. I think if you look, from my perspective this season, there's circumstances within that, but we should have never got to a point after getting to the playoff final where we have to bring in Neil Warnock on a third manager of the season, because that's not the sign of a good run club, in my opinion. There's various reasons for that. I think you touched on it with Phil. In hindsight, he did mess that up, like selling that. And I particularly, from myself, not with everyone else, but I took umbrage when he came back in and said he was kind of like the White Knight, saving us from a deal he sold to himself. He's done incredible stuff. Like Johnny said, never thought we'd be in the Premier League. And overall, it is positive. And as you guys touched on, I think time, is the big difference. I think we'll look back and forget all these little niggles. And it is, for me, and everyone's touched on it, it's what Kevin Nagel does now. Because, although I think his tweets have been incredible, he seems like a good guy, from what we said. We have no idea what he wants to do with the club. We have no idea what his plans are. We've not really heard from him. We heard a little snippet on Sacramento radio, and I think that'll be really interesting. And again, like we say, when time passes, we'll have a better idea. But it doesn't necessarily hinge on his legacy for me with Dean, because he's done a lot of good stuff. But like you said, it's really important with this new ownership, because there's a lot to sort. The season is July, August, and still a lot up in the air.
I think we were really lucky though. I mean, when Dean took over, I remember that Southend game that he took over. Hal Robson-Kanu scored the goal for Southend. They were on loan, and I remember, and he tells that story, does Dean, and when he walked out there, and he thought someone's got to do something, and if he'd have known what he'd have done, he wouldn't have been advised. But I just remember the early days at Canal Side. Every other Saturday, Dean seemed to be doing a Q&A. He was very open. I remember when he, was selling some of the, our better players, he were always fronting up and stuff as well. And I just think from when he took over to where it's all ended, that's why I was so hopeful that we could stay up on that as well. Because to me, it's like his legacy is there, and obviously some other people might have some other views, but just kind of maybe winding it on though, where foreign ownership, we've never had a foreign owner, and it's fascinating how it's all going to work. You're going to have a front person. It could be a man, it could be a woman, but someone's going to be there. Obviously, Kevin Nagel's going to be directing from another country. I went to Wigan the other week to watch the rugby. I won't mention Leeds, but I will. But I was chatting to a couple of fans there who support Wigan Athletic, and they despise their foreign owner, but probably not as much of the players who... It's such a minefield, isn't it? Because obviously he seems a bit of a character. He's old, and you speak to some. I did a podcast again with Sacramento, and he never said at one point that he wanted to take over any, other clubs and stuff. So it's so interesting. I was so glad that he came to that last game, like you said on your podcast. But what do you think we're going to have to get used to as fans with a foreign owner compared to I don't even go back to Ken David, Dean Hoyle, even Barry Rubery, just like English people. What we're going to see different?
I think there's all sorts of foreign owners. This is the thing. And I think...
Same as there's all kinds of English owners.
Yeah. I think one of the things me and Steve talk about is, have we seen any red flags yet? And, the only thing that's raised an eyebrow is wearing flip-flops to Marston's. So...
And misspelling Huddersfield every other day.
Yeah. And, at the moment, we just don't know. I think the thing is, I don't think he's going to be an absentee owner in the fashion that some foreign owners are. He was very taken, I think, with the club. He was very taken when he visited. He bought a little camera crew with him because he wants to document this journey. I don't know what form that's going to take, but I
think it's a YouTube thing.
He's a bit old to be a YouTuber, isn't he? But he's in this full bore. I certainly get the impression that this is not an investment purchase. He's in this because he wants to be involved. And I think when you're talking about Dean's legacy, I think it's right to discuss it in terms of what happens next, because he has tried to pass this club on once and it didn't go very well. Now, there were lots of mitigating circumstances and things we don't need to go into, but it is going to be interesting. My gut feeling on all of this is that he's going to come in, he's going to do what every foreign owner does who is sort of very invested, which is make a load of mistakes at first, because they think, we can do it this way and this way and this way, and we maybe, if we just look at this slightly different, we'll make a big difference. And it doesn't work like that. And then what he'll do is regress to the mean, get some right people around him, and learn from those mistakes. And I think if you've got an owner who learns from those mistakes, that can take you a long way. So we'll see.
Obviously pounds and pence. It does, like you were saying, Stevie, it does annoy me. People what have you got to spend and stuff. But do you think the fact that he comes across as a character I just think that'll appeal to the people in Huddersfield, or
I think I can tell you. I'll tell you something. I spoke to somebody at the club, and they weren't sure what to expect from him coming over, and they made an offhand comment about when would be the next time that he would see him, and he replied, "You'll be seeing an awful lot of me." So that suggests to me that somebody who is quite taken with the experience, and it was a great day to come. Let's be honest. It was he couldn't have picked a better day to come. But I do believe it's not going to be a case of... I don't think he's going to be hands-on in the sense that he's going to be making every decision, but I think he's certainly going to have a key role, and he's certainly going to want to know what's going on at any given time.
Yeah, I think it's really, I wrote a piece about this the other day, but I think it's really important he has the right advisors around him as well, because we've seen plenty of times in this division, owners who have their hearts in the right place, foreign or otherwise, I'm just thinking of one English one in particular, who have their hearts in the right place, put loads of money in, pour in the money, try and do things the right way, but because they're listening to the wrong people, it all goes to pot anyway. And so I think it's really important that he gets the right board in, the right backroom staff in, and that he's listening to the right people, whatever level of investment he's looking at putting in, whether that's continuing what they have been or increasing it, whatever, he needs to be listening to the right people.
The last point I wanted to make, though, just to go back to Dean Hoyle, is that the days of sort of fan ownership, having a fan who's worth enough money to be able to run a championship club, they've pretty much all but gone. You know, it's no surprise to anyone in this room that I quite like Brighton and Hove Albion. And we have Tony Bloom, they have Tony Bloom. And he is a fan first and foremost. When he goes, it'll be a very sad day. And that's what I think with Dean Hoyle going, take everything else out of it. I don't think you'll ever have a sort of dyed-in-the-wool Huddersfield Town fan own Huddersfield Town again. And that is quite a momentous thing when you think about it.
I think just the thing I would add in terms of Nagel is when we spoke to Alicia Rodriguez, who covers Sacramento Republic, you know, she knew a little bit about him as an ownership. And the thing that really stood out to me was she said, you know, he wants to get involved, but he trusts people and picks the right people to do their jobs and leaves them to it. And I think we touched on ownership here, and that's the thing you want to hear. You don't want someone like a Todd Bowley, for example, at Chelsea, who's going to come in, although spend a lot of money and be director of football himself and try and do swaps, and all sorts. So I think that is encouraging, and like you said, there is no red flags. But
we've been talking between ourselves for a little while.
We should, yeah.
Want to open to the floor?
Sorry, anyone else like to ask a question? Who wants to come forward? Come on then, in the flat cap. Come on. You can come to me. Do you want to meet me halfway? I don't think it's that long. Come on, I don't bite. And I'm not as pissed this time, so there you go. It does look right.
I am. It's a double-edged question, first of all, to the audience, really, because I've heard the great Matthew Glennon talk about Fothers, and who would be willing to put £10 in a pot for a white-collar boxing match between Matthew Glennon and Thorringham. Any takers?
Matt's willing to put in much more than a tenner.
Yeah. He'll buy the gloves, yeah. All the talk of managers tonight have just made me reminisce a bit, really. And if anyone could put the worst managers in the last 10 years, where would we find ourselves in what we've had in this last season, really? I mean, 3 managers, obviously one legend in Warnock, but Schofield's just recently been sacked by Doncaster, and we all know what everyone thinks about Fothers. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
It's always completely contextual, and like people always trot out the win percentages and points per game, things like that, but they're kind of irrelevant. You often get in those lists that managers who've done really well are in the middle of the list because they've got promoted, and then it's harder to get points in the division above, funnily enough. I think Fotheringham will be very not fondly remembered. I think Danny, I think everyone sort of gives him the benefit of the doubt because everyone understands he was in kind of an impossible situation. It wasn't the right move at the time, and Matt's spoken about the difficulties he had as well behind the scenes, but I don't think anyone's sort of attaching any blame to Danny because we all know what happened in pre-season. But I think Fotheringham will be remembered very, very dimly. Not, again, points per game over a whole season keeps down up, actually, because I think he had just over a point per game. But the football was absolutely abysmal.
Yeah, it's not just because I'm very scared of Matt Glennon, but I wouldn't have Danny Schofield anywhere near that worst list because he was on a hiding to nothing the minute he got the job. And that's not just us saying that. He genuinely was. There was a lot went on and he never really had a chance. And whereas Mark Fotheringham, I think it was slightly weird that he got appointed and the club didn't let him bring in anybody beside him. I think.
Well, I don't think he had any friends. I don't think he had Well, no, but he's never had a crew, so it's like it must be very hard to then go and start picking people, because he didn't even know Miller. He only met him on a coaching course. They weren't even friends. Yeah. So it's like you've not got the experience of saying, right, there's my goalkeeper coach, there's my first team coach, there's my tactical coach, and when you've not, because he got thrown in so quickly. Because I spoke to an agent and who spoke to him, and he was going for a development job, and next thing he's Huddersfield Town's manager in the Championship. So I don't know if he was not allowed to, or the fact of he didn't have the people to draw upon.
But the thing is, then, if that's the case, you can't then spend every press conference telling us about all these people, you know, and your reputation and all of this sort of thing, if that's the case. And I think Fotheringham is he's either, depending how you look at it, he's either well down there or well up there.
Jan Sievert as well. That wasn't that long ago. Anything? I think Fotheringham is well up there.
But I think circumstances as well. Budgets, players you've got, money available. You know what I mean? Division that you're in as well, because obviously the second of the Premiership with David Wagner deciding to use wingers, then he brings in the players he brings in. It doesn't go well. Reverts back to his old style of play. Doesn't go well. He's a legend of the club for what he did, and that'll never change. But there was still an era where you thought, what's he doing? You know, who's he brought in? Because he had full control of the players he brought into the club as well. So I think everyone's got, you know what I mean, there's some with some massive highs, some with some lows attached to it, and some that were just shite.
Some of them have got really good win rate, like you say.
Yeah,
really
I was about to say, going on the stats, one of the best managers they've ever had is Lee Clark, Matthew.
Yeah.
Well, League One with that budget, I'm not overly shocked.
But no one's gonna. But he could never get him promoted, so it's meaningless.
It is, and when you've got Kevin Kilban on £20,000 a week in League One,
he had a high win percentage because he never got them promoted and had several years in League One where he should have had one.
And you look at sort of the impact some of the managers have had off the field as well, and you look in particular at Andy Ritchie and Chris Powell, and fans were just leaving in droves because of how boring and how dull life was around the football club. But they've got decent records when you look at it on paper. But then
it's budgets again, isn't it? It's budgets, it's players coming in. I remember Peter Jackson saying to me, Matt, we can't even sign a loan player. We can't even bring anyone in. They're bringing all the youth team players in, who not bad players in the time, but they were never gonna kick the club on. But when you've not got, say, a budget or anyone to come in that quality to come in and help you, it is. It's tough.
Yeah, let's move on. Next question. Hands up. Anyone who wants to answer a question? Ask it. Chris, go on then, Chris.
I've seen recently. Warnock I've seen, how do I word it? Alan Nixon, the journalist, I've seen on the Twitter that when Kevin Nagle takes over, he's going to try and persuade Neil Warnock to come back. Do you think we should? I don't think so. I think we should just leave him as he is and remember for what he achieved. I'm not sure if I want to believe that report, really.
I think I'm not sure that report particularly adds anything. Because, the thing is, if you were Kevin Nagle and you spent the last, bear in mind that Warnock was manager when the takeover was announced, and and he will have seen as well through the talks what it was like under Fotheringham, then what it was like under Warnock, and everything like that. He would be daft not to look at that and go, well, I'll at least ask if he wants to stay. But I think Warnock's been very, very clear that he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to work full time at this stage of his career, and who can blame him? He's had 43 years of management, and he says he hates the motorways, he hates the hotels. He just wants to work 10 to 12 weeks a year, and fair play. So I would be surprised if that turned into anything, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they at least asked him and say he's sure.
I don't think he's physically capable of doing a full season. I'm not doing him down when I say that. I think there's a reason he wants to work 3 months a year at the moment, and he's completely earned that. And I think when he pops up in probably Plymouth in February and does the same thing again, I think absolutely fair enough. I think it's a lovely story and it's a lovely narrative to say one more year, etc. But I think
he puts his heart and soul into it. You can see the energy he expels. That grimace between him and Ronnie. I don't think he's ever smiled at Ronnie. You know what I mean? Them two are just looking at each other and having a right pop, and it's brilliant to watch. But 74 years old for a man, you know what I mean, of that age, and the enthusiasm and the care, because we have this stupid comment of young and hungry, like I said before, I'm middle-aged and starving. You know what I mean? You always want to do your best. You're either a character who does or a character who doesn't. He does. So that's why he expels so much energy. And no, I think it would be too much, like Dave says.
Can I ask a quick question on that? Can we talk before about whoever does come in afterwards, whoever this next manager is kind of the man after the man, which is always a bit of a tough gig. We've seen a few, well, actually historically we've not been great at appointing the man after the man. But this isn't necessarily my opinion, but do you think there's potential for Warnock to kind of, he's been talked around being in an advisory role or kind of director of football or something like that. Do you think that works or do you think it's just a clean cut?
I think the part of the problem is, though, he's such a huge figure.
Yeah.
And whoever's in the dugout for Town has got to be his own man. And it is a horrendous job to replace Neil Warnock. But look at the position you're in because of Neil Warnock. He's got to try and just take it on as far as he can. And I think, as I said, I think the new ownership will make mistakes. I have no idea who the manager will be. We'll wait and see. But just having Neil Warnock in the stand, looking down over you as you're 2-0 down at home because you're trying to change the way the team's playing, etc. I just don't think that's a great situation to be in. I would always have him on the end of the phone, you know, and Neil Warnock, I'm sure, will pick up the phone to anyone at Huddersfield Town who rings him for some advice. But having some sort of official role and having him turn up at games, I don't think it's where the club needs to be going forward.
It's Ferguson watching Moyes from the stands, isn't it? Like Emperor Palpatine sitting up there. But yeah, I can tell you the club really, do you remember right at the start of the season, the only game Danny won, in fact, against Stoke, Warnock was at that game, just came back as a guest, I think, to promote his tour. And the club were really careful around that, their media team, to be like, he's here for the tour. Like, they were really keen to stress he is here for the tour. Because they didn't want the rumours at that point, and that was before he'd even come back and had that run.
Yeah.
So imagine what it would be like next season.
David Wagner came the week after.
And then Wagner came the week after, yeah.
I think what surprised me was the national loving for Warnock. I thought he were Marmite, and maybe he still is in some parts, but I were really amazed with the publicity that we got. The love, honestly, I work with a lot of Leeds fans, and they loved it, because I think the managers now, Pep Guardiola, yeah, he mentioned him and that as well, and I was quite surprised with that. But then it's almost like, I think there's that many coaches say a lot without saying anything. I think someone who wears their heart on the sleeve, although thankfully Big Sam's proved that it doesn't always work, you know, that kind of approach. But
there's no one above him in football. No one above Big Sam.
Honestly, I was feeling everyone were wanting us to do it.
Yeah. Say what you want. There's no one above Big Sam in football. He said it himself.
The thing with the being laid back and being chilled out and things like that, and we've said this on the podcast several times, but Warnock can say things that no other manager, like, imagine Fotheringham saying, unless we lose 6-0 to Burnley, I'm not bothered. Imagine the slating he'd get. But Warnock can do it, and people just think it's funny, because it is.
Yeah, Matty Pearson.
He just has that goodwill. Yeah, bringing up
West Brom how many times?
Bringing up Pellick, giving it that goal away against Coventry. No other manager can do that. It'd be like, oh, they're burying him, they're throwing him under the bus. But Warnock can do it because he's got that goodwill in the bank, and everyone just takes it as it's meant.
Lovely stuff. So I think this place shuts in 5 minutes, so we've got time to get in a few more questions. So hands up. Anyone want to chat to me? Ask a question?
Maybe one more, I think, Brady, the way
way
we're going on answering these.
Aye, so given we're not going to have a Warnock-Jepson partnership, who as pundit would you pick as manager?
David?
Question.
There's a young man at Barnsley, Michael Duff, who I think is extremely interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day who has played them very recently, and he said he has never seen a team better coached off the ball outside of the Premier League. And the way he sets them up, the way he makes changes in games, the way he utilises certain players, he's not working with diamonds there. It's not a great squad. He's not got a load of superstars.
John Russell's in it.
Yeah, John Russell's not in it, which proves what a good manager he is.
Dave, how big Monday's game, if Barnsley win, or do you think it's not going to make any difference? If we wanted him, we could get him out.
Well,
if Barnsley
I think that's what it comes down to. I think if Barnsley go up, I think there's an element where he's probably not gettable straight away. But I think if they don't go up, I think he's one. Look, Stephen Schumacher is the obvious one at Plymouth, but he's not gettable.
You're not getting him,
he's not gettable. I think if Town could get him, they would get him tomorrow because he's brilliant. But Town aren't the only ones who think that. That's the problem. So if he was available, it'd be a bit of a bun fight. But I think, for me, I'd be looking at Michael Duff, and if they don't go up, I'd be very interested. Very interested.
I think even if they do go up, I think there's questions about how much investment Barnsley could make, etc. So it could be a bit of a Paul Warnock Rotherham situation where he even went down a league, and obviously he wouldn't even need to do that. So.
Yeah, I'm in the Duff camp as well, so quite often, more than not, yeah.
Load of old Duffers here, aren't we?
What about Ian Evatt? Or has his stock fallen with Friday's result?
I think,
just under new deal.
Unquestionably, football-wise, you have to admire the job that Ian Evatt has done at Bolton. I think that's how I'd put it. What did I say? What did I say? Bournemouth? Bolton, sorry. Yeah, football-wise, I think you have to admire it.
Cool. I think we'll probably end it there unless anyone's got a quick question. No? You'll probably want to go and stop listening to us. Okay. Well, yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you to everyone for coming. And we'll be back next season. Hopefully we'll have some more interesting things to talk about, exciting time at Town. But yeah, no, thank you all for coming. Thanks for listening throughout the season, and up the Town.
Yeah, and if you have any more questions...
There's a team that is dear to its followers. The colours are bright blue and white. They're a team of renown, and they're the pride of the town. And the game of football is their delight. And all the while upon the field of play, thousands loudly cheer them on the way. Often you can hear them say, who can beat the Town today? And then the bells will ring so merrily, and every goal shall be a memory. So Town, play up and bring that cup back to Huddersfield. So Town, play up and bring the cup back to Huddersfield.